across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
2 minutes past 1, my thanks to the brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer. Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins today and tomorrow. Back on Breakfast this weekend, of course. And breaking this afternoon, Labour is risking a lost generation of jobless young people as a landmark report warns that 1 in 6 could be out of work by 2030 unless there is major welfare reform. Now, this comes as elsewhere, new figures show that the share of babies born to migrant mothers in Britain has reached 40%. 40%, you heard me right, for the first time. Your reaction, please. Is Britain heading in the right direction or the wrong direction? And what about the jobless youth? The highest youth unemployment in the whole of Europe, and it's getting worse. Who do you blame? Have politicians failed the next generation? Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. I've got the dream team today. Our executive producer, Finlay, coming in hot. Bursting with editorial gold. Directing our TV output, Jana, who takes no nonsense nor prisoners. Amy pressing the buttons, and Faith is taking your calls. Give her a call now. Book your place on the show. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Are you worried? Compare their situation to yours. They're on welfare, which isn't great, but it's because they can't get a job because of this government's policy. But it's all about your views. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. I've got one of the country's most explosive political commentators coming into the studio in just a few minutes' time. But first, Dolan's Dispatch. Socialism doesn't work, chapter 377. In a damning new report, former Health Secretary under Tony Blair, Alan Milburn, reveals that the national insurance tax raid on employers, crushing red tape, so-called workers' rights rules and a hike in the minimum wage are putting a generation of young people out of work. Now, this is nothing short of a catastrophe, with 25 times more being spent on welfare for young people than getting them a job. You heard me right. And of course, a large percentage of these young people, having tasted and having drunk from the welfare well, will remain on benefits for the rest of their lives. Healthy, able-bodied people who won't lift a finger for decades. So aside from being a total economic time bomb, because the money just isn't there to pay people to stay at home indefinitely, this is also a societal and cultural nightmare too, as young people never get into the habit and the mindset of work. Setting your alarm early in the morning, in the dead of night sometimes, polishing your shoes if you're working in an office, pressing your uniform if you work in a factory or a supermarket. They will experience none of those things. We are approaching a very dangerous scenario in which you can no longer call Britain a nation of working people, with increasing numbers taking out more than they put in, and a minority paying their taxes, making sacrifices, taking risks, working overtime to prop up this broken system, this Ponzi scheme of an economy and a society. Well, I'm massively impressed by Alan Milburn. He's one of those rare lefties with common sense. Let's take a listen, if we can, Jana, to his remarks about welfare.
Of those who first claimed a health and disability benefit aged 16 to 24, almost half are not in work or education 15 years later. 15 years.
Now, folks, I'm not crazily religious, but I'm a proud Roman Catholic, raised in the Roman Catholic tradition from birth. So may I offer a few thoughts from Father Dolan this afternoon? Unfortunately, I haven't got the cassock because it doesn't fit. But here's what I'll say. Work is virtuous. Work is a moral, economic and public good. A work ethic is rooted in the Judeo-Christian values of this country. To be idle, to be feckless, to be lazy, to feed off others is a deep sin. Now, of course, this growing crisis is not of young people's making. In school, we're telling them to be professional victims if they're having a bad day or finding life difficult. It's a mental illness, apparently, and off to the GP they go for a jar of pills. You wouldn't believe it, but hundreds of thousands of young people are currently signed off sick with a variety of mental health problems, stress, anxiety, and ADHD. What the hell is ADHD when it's at home? I thought that was a rock band from the 1980s. And this truly awful government has made things far worse for young people by making it more complicated, riskier, and more expensive for businesses to employ them. The hike in the minimum wage is utter insanity. Not only does it drive inflation up and place a burden on already cash-strapped businesses, which are going to the wall on a daily basis, it literally feeds unemployment. Why would that be? Well, you get it, don't you? Finlay gets it, and Faith, and Jana, and Amy. It's quite a big team here. I don't know how we pay for all of this. We all get it, don't we? But the numpties that don't get it are those who govern us. They don't understand because no one in the cabinet has ever started a business. The companies employ young people because they're cheap. So if they're no longer cheap, employ them, they will not. Now, we've got to say that these young people, they are not to blame. They want to work. Listen to this from Alan Milburn about the desire of young people to get into the world of work.
One of the most striking findings in this review is that 84% of NEET young people that we surveyed said they wanted a job or they wanted to be in training. So I do not accept the caricature of a generation that is not interested in work. This is a generation that wants the chance to work.
And what about this for a statistic? The UK has the highest number of out-of-work youngsters in the whole of Europe, which is going some, given that no one in Spain works. Inflation, unemployment, anemic growth, these are all metrics that demonstrate the economy and therefore the country is broken, absolutely. Those metrics are the equivalent of the lights on the dashboard of your car telling you something is wrong. But youth unemployment is the biggest and brightest of red lights on your dashboard. Of course, we didn't help when we locked young people in their rooms for the best part of 2.5 years during what was, in my view, a catastrophic COVID overreaction. What happened as a result of COVID policies in relation to healthy young people? Well, they faced no mortal threat from the virus, but they were separated from their friends. They were glued to their phones and computer screens. They had the grim dystopia of online Zoom lessons for which teachers were pathetically unprepared. And they gained weight, partly as a result of comfort eating and partly because of a lack of physical activity. COVID, or the reaction thereof, was a disaster for young people. We are now paying the price. Never forget that the government needlessly closed schools. They taped off swings and slides and locked playgrounds and sports facilities. These cretins, who I called out when I was sat here in this studio during the pandemic hosting a drive time show in 2020, they even closed the gyms. Things are a total mess. The country is going in the wrong direction. And as with what Tony Blair said about no plan for government, there is no plan for young people either, which is a view shared by big Alan Milburn. Take a listen.
And I'm sad to say that for far too long in our country, the NEET crisis has been swept under the carpet. Not any longer. This review exists because today Britain faces a genuine generational fault line. We do not just have a chronic problem. It is getting worse, not getting better, and we have neither a system or a plan to deal with it. A decade or more ago, the problem was temporary youth unemployment, and youth unemployment today is still, of course, far too high. But now it is something deeper and far more corrosive. It is youth detachment from the labour market.
Alan Milburn, the lesser-spotted, sensible left-wing person. Almost every policy over the last 3 decades has hurt young people, including the printing of money in 2009 during the credit crunch, which inflated the value of property so that home ownership is now beyond the reach of a majority of young people. They've got no chance. Now, this too is dangerous, because with no skin in the game, no commercial investment in our capitalist economy, these young people are bound to be drawn to a radical, redistributive, socialist or even quasi-communist political party, like, for example, the Greens, led by Zach Polanski, or as I like to call him, Captain Cleavage. The other big elephant in the room when it comes to the selling out of our young people and their opportunities is mass uncontrolled immigration. It's been a disaster for the working class, which is why they hate it, and it's been a disaster for young people who unfortunately are very woke and don't understand the damage of this policy. So how about this for an eye-watering statistic at 14 minutes past 1 in the afternoon? 27 migrants are hired in this country for every 1 young Brit given a job. 27 migrants for every 1 Brit that gets employment. Let that sink in. And our young people are now in competition with people from overseas for precious state resources, for a share of the welfare pie, for access to housing, for the use of our roads, the water supply, dentist appointments, GP surgery, public transport, every other public resource you can think of. Young people are now competing with folk from overseas. So young people are our future, which means they're supposed to be our top priority. But at the moment, they are at the bottom of the pile. And mark my words, this doesn't end well. 0344 499 1000, your reaction. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? With me live in the studio, one of the country's most compelling political commentators, Peter Barnes. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see you.
This doesn't end well.
No, it doesn't. And I know you're very nice about Alan Milburn. He's part of the problem. He was a member of a government that started this crisis, and it was called sending everybody to university. 50% of the university population educated was the dumbest and most destructive policy that we've ever had in this nation, because you told people, go to university, study dance theory, and everything in the economy is going to work out perfectly. It was nonsense. That generation, my generation, the one before, was sold a categorical lie. They're in mountains of debt that many will never pay back or get out of. And it is a crisis that was caused by just wanting to be nice. It is absolutely pathetic where this country finds itself in, because we blame the benefits bill, but it's not that. Realistically, that doesn't help. But we have an underskilled young population that have been let down at primary school, secondary school, and at sixth form colleges. This problem starts way before anything to do with mental health or anything like that. It is absolutely obscene to me that we find ourselves with we're having to bring people in to do the jobs that people not just want to do, they are unskilled to do. Most of the young generation now are skilled to be shelf stackers, and that's about it.
At best.
At best.
And that's if they turn up on time.
And this is also a huge problem. You're right to say also, it's not really their fault. If this is how they were raised, if this is the culture that they were brought up in, why would you want to get up and go to work? If your mum and dad didn't, if nan and granddad didn't, why would you? That's part of the bigger problem. We have to have a huge cultural turn before we have the economic turnaround.
Was it also the best move to lock very healthy young people up for the best part of 2.5 years, close schools and keep them away from their friends? Absolutely not.
I mean, I work with a few of the firms I work with. They have a lot of younger people in there. They look at the phone, it rings, and it's like a bomb going off. They don't know what to do. They panic because they have to talk to another human being. You know, it staggers me that is where we are now, that we're so scared of human interaction, and yet we are a service-based economy, so you have to talk to people, and yet we're not teaching people how to do it. Again, I don't blame young people for being in this situation when, like you said, we lock them away. We don't teach them correctly. We give them every excuse under the sun not to go to work. So why would anybody bother? Then they added icing on the cake. Here's some money. Sit at home and play Xbox all day.
OMG, he is coming in hot. You are listening to Talk. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? How do we fix it? I want your thoughts. Is it the fault of this Labour government, or is it over generations, as pointed out by the Barnsley here? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Brad has messaged the show. Good afternoon, Mark, and hello, Peter. Employers have stopped taking on young people for the same reason that landlords have stopped renting out houses. Government interference and legislative disincentives. Absolutely right. Neil in Salisbury. Good afternoon, Mark, and hello, Peter. Increased cost and risk to employers has increased youth unemployment. Who knew? Well, everyone, apart from this useless government. Apparently great show. Neil, thank you for that. Very interested by both of those points, Peter. Government interfering and legislative disincentives. What we need from the state is to get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, rule one. It's what was it? Ronald Reagan's favourite phrase was the most terrifying 9 words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I always say the second one is, won't somebody think of the children? You know, it's yet again, it's this kind of, well, we've got to do something. No, you don't. Just sit there on your hands and don't do anything, and business will sort itself out. The market, I always thought, was a living thing. It will fix itself. If there is an incentive in one area, it will pump money that way. If the minute people start manipulating it and messing around in it and adding bureaucracy and red tape and making it more difficult for employers and landlords and lots of other areas like this, you suddenly wonder why everything is collapsing at the same rate everywhere. Oh yes, it's because you did the same thing everywhere. You look at pubs, youth unemployment and the housing area. They're all collapsing because red tape, bureaucratic nightmare.
We have something akin, don't we, Peter, to a command capitalist economy, where, yes, there is a market economy, but you've got the state telling businesses what to do. They're not all evil. They're not all greedy and money grabbing. A company like Sainsbury's, which is massive and a big employer, it's working on margins of 1.5% to 2%.
Yeah.
And so when they had, for example, the Nix raid, they said, well, this is going to set us back 300 mil.
Yeah.
Now, you might think that that's small change for us. It ain't.
No, it's not. It's generally not, because also what people forget is the money that companies make, they reinvest. So they use that money to employ more people. They use that money to retrain people, to actually invest in new areas and new sectors. So that's why you get one company that starts off, say, as a supermarket, and then the next thing you know, they've got a phone division, they've got this, they're banking. That is what they do.
Or they might buy a failing business and turn it around.
Exactly.
Which, oh my goodness, could then become successful and employ more people.
Oh, don't say that.
And pay tax receipts.
Well, I like that bit, but yeah. But no, again, if you want to have more money in the tax coffers, you put more money in the economy. It's basic economics that an A-level student learned, but as I just said before, we don't even teach basic economics anymore, so no wonder we've got this lot in charge.
No, I was listening to a Labour MP earlier. They're not all complete lunatics, and there is a Labour MP in the... he is in, I can assure you, the Merseyside area. I don't have the full details of this guy, but he talks a lot of sense. Maybe I'll find it. So there he is, I found it. Dan Carden. Are you familiar with his work?
I know the name.
He's called Blue Labour, which is basically common sense Labour.
Yeah, Lord Glassman's lot.
There you go.
Yeah.
And Dan Carden, don't get me wrong, he's still a kind of frothing lefty, but he's talked about growth before redistribution.
Yes.
This administration is at odds with that approach.
Well, I would say they are, but I don't think they understand what the word growth means. Because do you remember we had a manifesto for growth, we had a pledge for growth, we had this for growth. I still don't think they understand that you actually have to grow something to have growth. All they do is they strangle, they put down, and they just eradicate. There is no growth in this economy. I saw Keir Starmer the other day was celebrated being the fastest growing economy in the G7. I was like, if I had a shot for every time a Prime Minister's told me that in the last 5 years, I'd still be on the floor now. I mean, it's just preposterous that that they could come out with these statements and think that they're helping. They think that anything they're doing is actually making this better. This MP is perfectly right that you have to have growth before you can redistribute. I will say Dan Carden. But yeah, I mean, you've got to start putting money in the economy, which means you then have to start training people to have the jobs that are in the economy. Like I said, not everybody can do dance theory. You need somebody that's a brickie, that's a plumber, that's an electrician. When I was at university, those kind of jobs were looked down on. Those people that did those jobs were looked down and said, oh, if you end up doing that, you'll not have a good life. You have to go to university. Everybody was shoved through the university system. I know people now that have got their own business, they're employing 2 or 3 people, and they're plumbers, brickies, all that kind of thing. And they're doing better than some of my friends who work in the city. And this is the big problem, is that we demonised hard-working blue-collar jobs because they weren't seen as the right kind of jobs. I thought that is just despicable what we did.
It is true. And I take your critique of the Blair era and universities, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But listening to sensible left-wing voices like Dan Carden, Tony Blair yesterday saying Starmer's got no plans, scrap net zero, and bring down the welfare bill, etc. And then you've got Alan Milburn talking about how the Nix tax rate and the minimum wage and the red tape is creating youth unemployment. These are all sensible voices. These are not loud voices within this latest incarnation of the Labour Party, who, like the Democrats in America, appear to have lost the plot.
Yes, I think it's because now they've finally got into power and they don't know what to do with it. They're just protest people. They like to scream really loud, and then when they're given, OK, you run it for a while, they don't know what to do, so then everything just collapses at the same rate across the board. Which is
why they love gimmicky policies like two-child benefit cap and breakfast clubs.
Yes, breakfast clubs is a prime example. They think they can fix the nation with a breakfast club. It's preposterous. It's stupidity. And it is the last dying breath of a government where you start clinging to these kind of policies.
And can we please put paid to the idea that lifting the two-child benefit cap is going to, and I quote, lift millions of children out of poverty? There is no evidence that will happen.
No, not a single shred of it.
Giving money to parents is not the same thing as lifting children out of poverty.
I couldn't agree more. And it is absolutely... I think anybody that stands up and says that, where's the police to arrest them? Because that should be a crime, in my opinion, because you are lying to people. You are fundamentally lying to people. There is not a shred of evidence that suggests it is correct, so off you go. because you should not be in a public office with that level of responsibility and have that kind of free will to lie to the British public like
If you build a grammar school in every small town and city, that is an example of lifting children out of poverty.
Yes.
Because that's an elite level educational establishment where their job prospects, their life prospects will absolutely skyrocket.
I couldn't agree more.
So that would be an example of lifting children out of poverty.
Yeah, without a doubt. I couldn't agree more. But what you also have to do is make sure that that kind of state education keeps on par with it. What we didn't do is we let one thing skyrocket and the other thing crumble. So
the comps were terrible and the grammar schools were great.
And that was the problem. What you have to do is make sure that everything is on par, or at least has a sense of parity, whether it be a trade school, whether it be a grammar school or a university or whatever. Everything has to be the very best. We're supposed to be one of the best economies, best countries in the world. Our education system is absolutely catastrophic. Unless you get to the very, very top, if you're at Oxford, Cambridge, or one of the top medical schools, everything else is crumbling, and we are falling down the rankings faster than you can count. Ironically, nobody can count anymore in the country.
Well, woke began about 15 years ago when children were given medals for participating in the school fun run.
Yeah.
And it was been downhill ever since. Because that's the issue, and I think what the left don't understand is that, yes, you've got the mechanics of government policy, but a lot of this is cultural too. So the attitude to work, the attitude to welfare. Now, I'm older than you, but I remember when there was a sense of shame about taking money from the government.
Yes.
And it was there as an emergency, a last resort. It wasn't something you were proud to do.
Yeah.
Well, that's different now, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. And I think COVID was a great rapid kind of amplifier of the kind of lack of that kind of, what are you doing, go to work. In other words, it became okay just to sit at home all day and play Xbox.
Oh, you were a good person.
Yeah, you were a good person, like you said. But also, I do think that lack of sense of shame, because where I'm from in Makerfield is one of those kind of places where, what do you mean you're scrounging? Because that's what it was considered. You were considered a scrounger. You weren't considered some kind of welfare saint. And I think the degradation of that sense of kind of cultural shame as a way of saying, come on, you shouldn't be taking money from somebody who genuinely needs it, because that's the other side of this. Money is going to people that don't need it, and the people that do need it are being shortchanged because of it.
How about this? My daughter had a massive PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, after being held up by gunpoint and then a machete as well when working as a jeweler. She was unable to continue in the role she loved. I never for one moment thought she should claim benefits. As parents, it's our responsibility to continue to support our offspring. She's worked hard to build a new career working for herself. Hugely proud of her determination to continue her life. May God bless your amazing, wonderful daughter. And what an absolutely egregious and disgraceful crime that was. Peter Barnes just needs a black tie, and him and Mark will be a perfect colour match. Thank you for that. Well, you'll only know if you take a look at the show, which is being directed by the brilliant Jana today. So if you want to see the show, which is now a television product, then head over to YouTube, search Talk, and up we pop. Wouldn't mind getting on to briefly Labour and universities, which you mentioned in your response to Dolan's dispatch. I've had an unnamed texter saying, of course, they did away with polytechnics. This is the point. You're not slamming higher education or skills and training. Nope. It's just the red brick university myth.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. Nothing should fall below a standard of another one. And yet we looked, and it is that fact that we culturally looked down on anybody that wanted to work with their hands, that anybody wanted to actually graft, as my dad used to call it. You know, it's that kind of, you know, you be a brickie, be a labourer, be the people that build the houses and the offices for everybody to work in. You know, we need those people, and that's why you then had the increase of people coming from the European Union in 2014, because we had the skill shortage. What we didn't do in that gap is retrain our youth, our young people, to fill those jobs, so we didn't need to bring people in. We have the migrant crisis because we have the skills crisis. That is why it exists.
What do you make of that statistic that 27 migrants, the ratio is 27 migrants taking every new job versus one young Brit?
Yeah. How is it only 27? That's always, yeah.
What's the real figure?
What's the real figure? But no, I think this is yet again, we complain about the migrant crisis and we complain about this kind of youth unemployment, but we have to learn to take the step back as to how we actually got into this problem in the first place, and that is how we fix it. We should be pumping billions into education. We should have the best teachers. We shouldn't have the control of the domination of teachers' trade unions and all this kind of claptrap. We should be putting out into the world, and not just into our country, into the world, the best trained people. That is what a responsible government does. This lot and the lot before failed. Not just one generation, 2 to 3 generations, I'd say, so far.
Now, what was that degree you were critical of? Modern dance?
Dance theory, yeah.
Dance theory. Can I just tell you that you're very harsh on dance theory?
It's the one that my old university lecturer always used to talk about when I was in it. It was economics, because this is the point, is when I was at uni, this problem was predicted. So, yeah.
Well, I think you've missed a trick, and I'll tell you for why, because I think even at the best of times, you're very light on your feet.
I do. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
You're very nubile.
Yes.
There's
Both of those could be a criticism and a compliment at the same time.
There's more than the hint of Rudolf Nureyev about you. So I think if it had panned out differently, we'd be watching you at the National, what would it be called? The Royal Opera House. Listen, Sadler's Wells, brilliant to have you in the studio. Cannot wait for your next return.
Yes.
And you back presenting on Talk as well the other night. You had a good time?
I covered it on for Petri. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, loved it. Really did.
Well, my audience, our audience, love themselves a bit of Peter Barnes. He'll be back very soon, no doubt, as a guest commentator and host as well. Peter Barnes, political strategist. Much more to come, folks. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Let's talk about it. 03444 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark has messaged the show. Is it the avowed intent of this government to cause the calamitous collapse of the UK? What do you think? Well, Mark, it certainly looks like they're trying to do so, because it's quite clear, in my view, that so many of the government's policies are causing inflation and unemployment, particularly the national insurance tax raid, which happened in the last but one budget, and of course the red tape, the workers' rights. It's all a disincentive on the part of employers to hire people, which is what we want them to do, and that's why they're so valuable. Well, let's get the views now of Tina McKenzie, MBE, who is the UK Policy Chair at the Federation of Small Businesses. Hi, Tina.
Good afternoon.
Lovely to have you on the show. Look, you know as well as I do that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. No one is against the idea of a minimum wage, of paying people properly for an honest day's work. No one is against the idea of workers' rights, etc., etc. But it seems like the careful calibration between government policy and the real world of business is now horribly askew.
Well, the interesting thing is that we as a country are paying billions for these young people to be left behind, which just doesn't make any sense at all. So we're paying all these extra taxes, all this extra national insurance, in order that we end up keeping these young people out of employment, because we know that SMEs, and we told the government this, that if you continue to increase the cost of hiring, whether that's the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds going up over 65% in the last 4 or 5 years, or whether it's these extra increases on national insurance, if you continue to make it more expensive, then small firms will stop hiring. And remember, young people usually get their first chance of employment in the hospitality industry and retail, but usually from small firms across the country. So if you continue to make it more expensive for people to hire them, do not be surprised that, and I think the latest figure is 30% of SMEs have recruited fewer workers. There's no surprise, we told them that.
Well, indeed, because these businesses are not rolling in cash, are they? Given the impact of inflation, Many are still dealing with the legacy of COVID, the bounce back loans. We've got low growth. Everyone's skint. So these measures are not felt in isolation.
No, and over the period, and it isn't just this government, but over this period, I remember the financial crisis where, a lot of them were closed down, lost their monies, weren't treated very well by the banks, by the way, and had to pay a lot of money back, had to start again. Then they had COVID and thankfully had the furlough loans and various supports.
But that was all more debt, wasn't it?
More debt. They're paying all that money back. Then there's now international events where it's inflation, and the government have put the business rates back up. And there's every which way they turn, everything's going up. So no one is against paying more in a minimum wage. No, because inflation is up. No one is against paying their fair share. But it just seems to be that of the millions of businesses in the UK today, 5.6 million, most of them are SMEs. They're picking up most of the responsibility for everything, and enough's enough. And a lot of them now, 21% are saying in the future they're going to hire less, and only 8% are saying they're going to hire more. So no surprise. I mean, I would say, I'm in business, basic economics tells me that if you want to support SMEs taking on young people, put that money against the cost of employing them versus taxing them the other end and leaving the young people out of work. You know, the job centres, I think only 20% of people use job centres of even up and down the country. They're out of date. That's not where young people want to go and get work. Everybody's online these days. It's not the 1980s. Schools, education, it's simple. It's not rocket science. Let young people go and do work experience the way we did when we were kids. But oh no, you have to have insurance, and the insurance only starts at 16, 17 and sometimes 18. So they're not getting work experience. The education system needs kind of hold to the jobs that are out there in the country. But also, why not try teaching our young people about starting a business? 3 out of 5 of them either have a side hustle or want a business. There's a thing called the trading allowance that if they start a side gig, they don't have to pay tax on the first £1,000. Increase it to £3,000. Let's get the entrepreneurs going. Let's support these kids. Call it the side hustle allowance. Speak a language that they understand. So there's real simple things this government can do. But if you continue to put, for example, they just introduced Angela Rayner's employment bill with statutory sick pay now from day one. More cost for small employers. They're just not getting a break. And there was nothing in that last budget for them. And there's a thing called the Employment Allowance. When Rachel Reeves first came in the first year, she did a really good thing. She increased it. She nearly doubled it, actually. She increased it. And that really helped people in hiring because it offsets the national insurance costs if you've got under 4 staff. This year, she did nothing with it. They increased everything. So they could increase the employment allowance, make it easier for the small firms to hire. And all these schemes that are coming out now, and some of them actually, to be honest, the jobs guarantee scheme, they're coming out with really good ideas. But I would say, why are you offering those to these big multi-billion-pound multinational companies? They don't need help to hire people. Look at your indigenous small companies and help them, because they're the ones that are really suffering. They're the ones that are going backwards. They're the ones that are having to close. They're carrying the weight of all this tax. Help them. They are 99% of the businesses in the UK. And we seem to just talk about the big ones all the time.
And briefly, Tina, let's be honest about it. Businesses employ young people. It's a gamble for them. It's a roll of the dice. And they hire young folk because of less red tape, at least hitherto, and because they're cheaper. Well, if they cease to be cheaper, then hire them. They will not.
And it's not just because they're cheaper. The SMEs out there are our families. People that that have small business. It's your local butcher, your flower shop. It's someone starting up a small tech company from their back bedroom. They want to give the young people in their community a chance. They're the ones that if you're unemployed and you're sick for a long time, or you're disabled, or you're coming out of prison, it is the SMEs that are more likely to give you a chance. They want to support their local communities. They know the people in the communities, but it's just becoming harder and harder and harder. It's too costly. It's too expensive. The government are putting the money in the wrong place. They're putting the money in people's pockets instead of increasing the tax to look like, oh, we're the popular people, we're going to increase all your minimum wage. Well, that's no good if they can't get a job and you're leaving them in poverty. We've got to switch that around. We've got to help small firms, still pay them a good minimum wage, but help the small firms subsidise that to get these people into work.
Tina, more power to you. You speak a lot of sense. I wish we had longer. Thank you for your valuable time today. Tina McKenzie, MBE, UK Policy Chair at the Federation of Small Businesses. Jamie Booth is the Communications Director at the Jobs Foundation. Hello, Jamie.
Afternoon, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
You folks think you have the answer. How does the Jobs Foundation work?
I think firstly, it's a pleasure to follow Tina talking so eloquently about some of the answers to this problem. But I think to kick off with, it's worthwhile kind of reflecting on the seriousness of this situation and actually really welcoming the work that Sir Alan Milburn has done in this area. There's a massive human cost to 1 million young people currently out of work. That's 1 million young people across the country that don't have a purpose in life, don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. We talk a lot about poor mental health faced by young people across the country. What's the number one thing we can do in a lot of these situations to improve people's lives? Is actually to get them into work. So we really welcome the work that Sir Alan Milburn has done on this. There's also a huge economic cost. I think for me, one of the really striking things that came out of Milburn's interim findings this morning was the fact that having 1 million young people out of work is costing us as an economy £125 billion per year. That's more than the entire education budget. So we talk a lot about how we're taxed too high and how we've got this looming fiscal crisis. Getting young people back to work is both, should be a moral mission for the country, but it's also the number one thing that we can do to actually turn our economy around the crisis that it's currently facing.
Most definitely. And the truth is that this is very culturally significant as well, isn't it? It's not just about the economy and about the numbers. It's about young people having the habit of work, which is the most satisfying thing you can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've spent a lot of the past year touring the country, speaking with both employers and speaking with schools for a new report that we're calling The Bridge, looking at what can you do to stop people from falling into that gap between education and between employment. And it's not that young people don't want to work. The answers are out there. I'd like to give the example of a school up in Alfreton, which is what is one of these stereotypically called left behind areas. And the school was failing. It had, I think, the third lowest roll in the local area. And what they did was a local business, Chris Thornieper, who's a fantastic man, took over the school. They made employment skills and careers education a core part of the curriculum. And what has happened now? This school, in an area where there's not much going on economically, now has 0 neets. If that can be done in areas like Alfreton in Derbyshire, then it can be done across the whole country too.
And we know, don't we, Jamie, that we have a looming mental health crisis among young people. One of the best ways out of that is a satisfying job, interaction with other people, structure, discipline, and a bit of money in your pocket.
Completely, completely. I think one of the other really interesting things that came out of the conversations that we've had across the country, speaking with people like Tom Kerridge, who you all know, the famous chef, it comes across that the number one thing that employers want in young people and what they're looking for in young people is character. They can teach them the right skills. They're not expecting people to come straight out of college or school and know everything about what it is to work in a kitchen or work in a factory. But they want young people coming out of school that know how to turn up on time, that know how to engage with other people. And those are the really important things that I think before COVID, schools did a better job of instilling in young people. But as the Milburn review acknowledges this morning, there's very much a gap there in people coming out of school with the right attributes and the right character to go straight into the workforce.
And Jamie, the bottom line is that businesses mostly want to look after their staff. They want to pay them properly if they can afford it. And they would like to have a ladder up which their team can climb. You know, the metric of a successful business is staff retention and staff progression. So perhaps businesses don't need quite so much government interference.
Completely. Mark, you have all the key Jobs Foundation lines at your fingertips, it seems like, because I think this is the really underappreciated point in that businesses, especially local businesses, family-owned businesses, they care for their staff. They see it as a real, point of pride for them that they operate in local areas and they give people that first rung on the career ladder, and they support them throughout their lives and give them opportunity. So it is heartbreaking when you speak to businesses across the country that say things like, we used to hire 10 apprentices or 10 young people a year, but because costs have gone up, because regulation has went up, we can't afford to give as much opportunity as we used to. So it's not that businesses don't want to give opportunity to young people. It's that they're facing successive pressures, as Tina so eloquently outlined before me, whether that be, massively above inflation pay rises, whether that be the various protections in the Employment Rights Act that will actually have a massively detrimental effect in terms of employment. So what we really need to do is back businesses to treat their staff well and go on creating that opportunity.
Which in the most majority of cases they will. Jamie, what a pleasure to have you on the show. Really enjoyed it. Let's speak again soon. My thanks to Jamie Booth, Communications Director at the Jobs Foundation, and Tina McKenzie, MBE. Your reaction, please. 0344 499 1000. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? It's over to you and your calls next.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royal tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Here is a voice note from Andrew.
People like Alan Milburn, etc., these were the guys that started this process, that brought down the jobs market, that caused youth unemployment to accelerate. And it's not decelerated, really, despite all the schemes, etc., etc. And then the enforced COVID lockdowns came along, have made it worse. And we as a society are supposed to pick up the tab for this now, be grateful for doing so, because we are, inverted commas, helping somebody. No, we're not. We're helping the powers that be above our government to do what they want to do in the new world order. Thank you very much. Great show, Mark. Keep it going.
Well, Andrew, I think you're not wrong. And if it is a new world order, it's pretty miserable, isn't it? It's not better than the old world that I remember and the last century. And my executive producer, Finley, just yelled in my ear quite rightly that COVID is a big part of this, and he's absolutely right. That is the big elephant in the room. I think the two things were the credit crunch because of money printing, which raised the value of fixed assets like houses, which means that half of young people, maybe more, have no chance of getting on the housing ladder. And then you've got the COVID pandemic, in which we locked up healthy people for a predominantly mild virus. Yes, it was nasty. It took too many lives. But COVID did not kill young people. And they should have met with each other. They should have gone to school, which of course happened in Sweden and Florida and Texas. And those places had the same outcomes health-wise and COVID-wise. But what they didn't suffer was the economic damage, and they didn't hurt the kids. Do you remember the playgrounds? Do you remember the slides being taped up? Outrageous. Alan's in Doncaster. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for taking my call. Interesting chat.
Well, it's a worry, isn't it? Because the children are our future, Alan.
They certainly are our future. And it's the children still at home with parents who should be at work or should be looking for employment that I want to talk about. I don't understand the logic whereby young people are unemployed for whatever reason and can't get a job, and they're stuck at home with their parents in the parents' house. The house is paid for, perhaps. The mortgage is paid, perhaps. They're getting food, shelter, and they're getting looked after. So why in the hell would you want to reward them for staying at home under the same roof of their parents?
I totally agree with you, Alan. I mean, if you're living at home with mum and dad and they're giving you bed and board, the only way you're going to get money is to work.
That's correct. And why would you want to work if you're getting money for free to stay at home with mum and dad?
Can I offer one defence, Alan? And I don't disagree with you about that. But I've taken a lot of calls and received messages on this show and on Talk, Alan, from parents saying my boy or girl would love to work and they cannot even get a job in a pub pulling pints.
They may say that, but surely that doesn't mean they should be paid to stay at home with mum and dad.
Yeah.
If those payments, welfare payments, unemployment payments were withdrawn from people living at home with their parents under sheltered houses, then they may well go out and work harder looking for a job.
Definitely. Were things different when you were a lad, Alan?
Oh, when I was a lad, paper boy. Then I used to go down to the farm and collect eggs from the hen house and do that. And I left school age 15 with no qualifications. I left on Easter Friday. I already had a job at the steelworks in Sheffield where my father worked. On Monday, I was cycling to work. And then at 23, the steelworks was closing down, and I joined the army for 32 years. I came out of the army age 55, and I got another job until I was 64 when my wife got breast cancer. So I worked all those times, and it's just a work ethic that's been ingrained in with me from my father.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you for your service to this country in the military and your incredible work ethic, a life of toil from the age of 15. I hope you're having, Big Al, a well-deserved retirement now, are you?
Well, as we get older, Mark, you know, things start to happen medically and your health starts to deteriorate. So I'd much prefer to be 15, getting on that bike and starting my working life again.
Most definitely. Alan, it's been very inspiring to take your call, and it's great to hear your story. Please let's speak again soon, and have a lovely Thursday afternoon. Alan in Doncaster there, who paints a very different picture of being a young person to how it is now in 2026. Tristan is in Bedford, which is the jewel in the crown of Bedfordshire. Hello, Tristan.
Jewel in the crown. I haven't heard that before.
I've had some good nights in Bedford, I will say.
Yes, I'm very happy to move. I did used to live in Lewiston, and moving over to Bedford, it is, I must admit, where I live in that, it's very nice.
I do like it. It's very nice green parts around as well. Tristan, what do you think about this? What's the problem?
I mean, I suffer from Crohn's disease, and as I said to your researcher,
Faith, yeah.
I mean, I look at life as a challenge. I don't get any help. I've tried to get help, but I don't get any help. And being diagnosed very, very young, you know, my parents, they weren't my friends; they were my parents, and they instilled that mentality. You know, being mentally strong. So when you dealt with different challenges and everything like that, you're able to deal with them. And as I said, I mean, going through some issues with my Crohn's at the moment, but you know, it's down to me. It's not down to anyone else. So the thing is, because of kids haven't had that life experience, a lot of kids haven't, and they haven't actually faced challenges. When it does come to, you know, getting a job and paying bills and all that kind of stuff, they're sort of, well, they're not sure what to do, because they've sort of, a lot of them have been told yes, yes, yes. They've not been told no. They've not been given the real challenge. And obviously we do have the issue with different things like energy policy and different policies that governments have brought in over the years as well. And it's just escalated the issue to now where we are now, is that, you know, you've got so many kids that are, you know, that are going to be unemployed. And even though they've got degrees and everything.
They've got degrees and they're healthy and able-bodied and fit. I mean, Tristan, it must strike you as rather bizarre because, you know, you've got this awful disease, Crohn's disease, very, very serious, debilitating condition. It's a chronic inflammatory bowel disease. What do you got issues, fatigue, stomach pain, cramping, you need to run to the loo. It's absolutely a devastating illness, but there's other youngsters, Tristan, you go about your life, there's youngsters aged 18 who are on benefits with stress, anxiety and ADHD. Meanwhile, you can barely walk.
I'm still working though, Mark. I still work.
Amazing.
I still have to work. I mean, I've had a few, you know, a few issues over the years.
Well, I mean, I took a call the other day from someone with Crohn's disease, and he said he's working too, and he sometimes has to crawl out of the house just to get to work.
Well, I came off medication back in 2013 due to a chronic flare-up I had, and I decided to make a decision coming because of the side effects and the compromised immune system. I decided to come off all medication. So now, in the situation I'm in now, in the current flare-up at the moment, I'm on zero medication because of the painkillers would just cause me to bleed, and I've got an operation coming up in the next couple of weeks. I've got a part of my bowel reduced.
Yeah, and yet you still work, and there's youngsters at home who are having a bad day, or they've got anxiety. What the heck is that, Tristan?
I find it incredibly frustrating.
Wouldn't you love to have anxiety instead?
Well, I do suffer from autism as well, but I've been diagnosed as high function or autistic.
Right.
But the thing is at the end of the day, when you hear these, you know, these different reasons why, you know, we've had people are when they get their degrees and they suffer from anxiety or stress and everything, it's incredibly frustrating because until they actually, you know, dealt with something debilitating as Crohn's, at the end of the day, there's no cure for it. I've got this for the rest of my life. But the way I look at it is I look at it as a challenge. Life is a challenge at the end of the day, and you know you have to do what you got to do. You know.
Well, Tristan, you've inspired me. Alan's inspired me. All the calls and messages do. More power to you. It's really, really tough what you're going through, and you've every right to feel sorry for yourself, but you don't, because it was how you were raised. Tristan, stay in touch with us and let us know how you're getting on with your health and your job and everything, but you're a credit to your parents. Folks, lots more to come. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Two minutes past 2. Good afternoon. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Ian Collins today and tomorrow. Back on breakfast this weekend. And I'm going to be looking after Drive next week in for the excellent, the marvellous Kevin O'Sullivan. You can't have too much of a good thing. So much to get through this afternoon. Labour is risking a lost generation of jobless young people as a landmark report warns that 1 in 6 could be out of work by 2030 unless there is major welfare reform. This comes as elsewhere, new figures show that the share of babies born to migrant mothers in Britain has reached 40% for the first time. Your reaction? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Is this country heading in the right direction? Is there any cause for optimism? What about our treatment of young people? Successive governments. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. Finley loves a voice note. We know you're busy. Lots of you are at work and you just got 30 seconds for me of a few truth bombs. Perhaps on your way home if you're lucky to clock off mid-afternoon. Weather's still gorgeous across the country. But what do you think, folks? Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Let me tell you something about young people, because I'm looking at 4 young people as we speak, and it's my team here at Talk. And there would be no afternoon show without their talent, hard work and ingenuity. I do nothing. I promise you, without their support, I'm just like a blob. I'm like an amoeba. Honestly, there is nothing without the scripts, the guests, the bookings. You've got Finley, who's a great executive producer, pressing the buttons, Amy, directing our TV output, Jana, and, of course, taking your calls and very much putting the show together, the co-producer of the show, Faith. So, you know, this is a team effort and it's young people. And what's happening at the moment is that hundreds of thousands of young people, name millions, are sat at home. All that potential, all that talent I'm looking at now, completely wasted. It's quite shocking, isn't it? Meanwhile, what about this story? Speaking of shocking, this is an exclusive from the Telegraph. And an investigation by that newspaper has found that 72,000 exempt accommodation properties for which local councils can be charged higher rents. Housing charities are using a loophole to rake in significant taxpayer-funded payments from property schemes aimed at people on benefits. Rogue landlords are advertising properties online as universal credit only or benefits only to target tenants who are disabled or homeless. To get to the bottom of this scandal, let's hear from Bob Blackman, Conservative MP for Harrow East. Hello, Bob.
Good afternoon.
Bob, thank you so much for joining us. What is the story here?
Well, this all started as a scandal several years ago when I was on the Housing, Communities and Local Government Select Committee. We did an investigation into what was going on in Birmingham. Birmingham is the worst case, but it's not by any means confined to Birmingham. Essentially, what rogue landlords do is they buy up a property, say a 3-bedroom property. They use all the permitted development rights to convert the property into an 8-bedroom property. Then they charge, then of course, because of they can then charge people whatever rent they like. Then that rent has to be paid by housing benefit, because it's so-called exempt accommodation. For it to be exempt accommodation, it has to be responsibility of a charity or a not-for-profit organisation. But the way this scam works is the rogue landlords obviously buy the property themselves, then rent it to a charity that they set up. Funnily enough, they're the directors of the company and the trustees of the charity. Then the local authority has no choice but to pay the rent that they charge. And I can tell you they charge an exorbitant rent. They don't look after the people concerned. And there are brilliant charities up and down this country who do excellent work looking after people who are vulnerable. These rogue landlords are just out to exploit.
Well, it's shocking. This is fraud on a grand scale, isn't it, Bob? It's costing my viewers and listeners, your constituents, millions. Do you think it will be difficult to crack down on this?
Well, my private member's bill became an act of parliament in 2023 to regulate the whole of this sector. The then government had regulations that underpinned that legislation ready to go. The general election intervened, and the new government said, we want to review all this and consult on it. They consulted on it, and the results are in, and we're now awaiting the regulations, which are urgently required to stop this scam and this rip-off of the taxpayer.
Well, listen, in that case, it's been slowed down needlessly by this Labour government. People should go to jail for this, shouldn't they, Bob?
Well, the thing is that it has not been illegal up until 2023 to do what these people are doing.
Wow.
It was one of these areas that you could get around. I have to say, the lawyer that wrote the legalese for the bill said to me, what we have to do is to countermand the clever lawyers that use the law to get around the regulations that currently exist. And so we've got to make it as watertight as we can. So we did. But of course, what the government of the day said was they wanted to have very detailed regulations to ensure that people couldn't get around the law. But frankly, this has been going on for several years now, and people have been making millions. There's also suggestions that there are organised crime units involved in this. And the people that are the victims in this are the vulnerable people. You can have an 8-bedroom property with a woman fleeing domestic violence, in another room, a recovering drug addict, another room, someone who's been released from prison for pushing drugs, and so on. There's no checks on these. The road landlords don't do anything to help these people. They just go around once a week and say, is everything okay? Fine, see you next week, and then charge a fortune for it.
Wow.
The problem then becomes that if they were to get a job, and I know we're talking about unemployment today as well, if they were to get a job, they get kicked out of their home because they can no longer command the housing benefit. So they're in a completely dead-end route to recovery.
Well, Bob, it's a credit to you that so long ago you called out this scam, which, as you said, has only recently become illegal. Prior to that, it was a loophole. But let's hope we can get this enacted, because ultimately it is robbing the taxpayer blind. Really appreciate your time. Bob, a quick response from you, if you can, on the remarks of Alan Milburn, who has said that if we're not careful, 1 in 6 young people will be out of work by 2030. This is a crisis that doesn't end well, isn't it?
It is, and the fact is that, unfortunately, the current government's increasing national insurance, they're increasing obviously the minimum pay that can be paid, and more importantly, the restrictions they've put on people doing basically short periods of time in work has really decimated, in particular, the hospitality industry. In my constituency, all the hospitality venues halve their staff, and the people that lose out, of course, are the young people who take these as a first job. They go on to other things. The reality is that once people get into a habit not working, it's very hard to break that. And right now, our job centres aren't training people for vacancies that are available. What they're doing, they're sending people on training courses. They're not the training courses to fit the jobs that are available. So we've got a massive job to actually get young people back working, encourage employers to take young people on. For example, a holiday on national insurance while they take people on, so they can prove themselves, reduce the business taxation so businesses can hire people and get the economy going. It's not rocket science. It does need to be done.
It isn't rocket science, is it, Bob? You get it, I get it. Your constituents get it, my viewers and listeners do. Those who govern us do not. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. We know how busy you are today, so thank you for making the time. And more power to you in closing this loophole, this horrible scam in which 72,000 exempt accommodation properties for which local councils can be charged are actually having exorbitant rents. The whole thing is a scam, and it's costing you and I millions. So what about young people? Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Vernon's in Staffordshire. Hello, Vernon.
Mark, good afternoon to you.
How are things with you, Vernon, this afternoon?
Yeah, It's great, Mark. Honestly, it's an interesting time, isn't it? Can you imagine the optics? So we have mass youthful employment, and Sir Keir Starmer and the useless Labour government opened the floodgates to free access for EU citizens, young EU citizens, to come to a country that has mass unemployment of young people.
Well, it makes no sense.
Yeah, it's just like, honestly, 2 and 2 make 5. You know, I have a magnificent business, Mark, and I'm taking a holiday, as I said to you before. I'm working 4 days a week now instead of 5 because there's no point. I'm not recruiting because there's no point. Recruiting is too expensive. And ultimately, if you don't work, you're better off than if you work. The optics are all wrong. The day-to-day route of travel is all wrong. I mean, for me, I have the perfect solution. I think I'd be the best politician you'd ever get because I'd give people 6 months' notice. I'd say, right, everybody, in 6 months' time, all of your benefits are over unless you are disabled or in need.
Yes.
There'd be no other benefits.
You provably can't work. And we're not talking about stress and anxiety or having a bad day, Vernon.
Stress and anxiety, there's a great cure. It's called work. And if you can't, or you could be an Aston Villa fan, that's a stressful of years. We've had a good season this year, but the reality of it is, Mark, it's very, very simple. If you get a job and you can't pay your bills, you do what I do and you do what your parents did before. Get a second job. And if that don't pay, you get a third job. But I'll guarantee you that there would be no unemployment if there were no benefits. There would also be mass deportation, self-inflicted, if there were no benefits. I go to Poland next week's work.
You're so right. I mean, if you cut the benefits to people from overseas, you don't need deportation. They will leave. The pull factor is gone. Vernon, I would love to speak to you at greater length. The line is not the best, but I've missed our conversation. So do call me again soon, Vernon, because you're an important voice on this network, because you're a self-made man. You've worked hard. You've taken risks. You've had good days and bad days professionally. And now, though you've got a successful business, you're not hiring more people and you've dropped down to 4 days a week because it is simply not worth it, given the anti-business environment that's been created by this government. And let's be clear, the Tories weren't great either. Ian's in London. Hello, Ian.
Good afternoon, Mark. I've got the full set now.
Well,
I've just spoken to them all.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Well, listen, you've obviously ended on a high.
Yes, this is true.
This is the high water mark.
No. Not ended. Not ended. Carrying on talking to you because you all talk sense.
God bless you, Ian. Right, what do you think about this? Why have we got this problem with young people not working?
Very simply, it goes to somebody that actually came out of a bit of common sense yesterday in his little essay, but it all goes back to Tony Blair. Because Tony Blair decided everybody's got to go to university. Why? Because at that time, the actual whole thing in education was there are certain members of the youngsters or certain parts of the youngster who would never get a job if all the cleverer ones went in just straight into employment.
Yeah.
There'll be some that would be left off. So what he tried to do is maneuver the ones that are a little bit clever, go to college, then go to university. So he got rid of that group. Then it went on to the ones that finished college. All right, they did that. But then they pushed university. Why? Because they wanted the money into the universities. It then went into the Conservatives, and they thought, oh, we've got a problem here. We can't afford to keep them paying for the courses. What we'll do is we'll make them pay, because if they pay for something, they might keep to it if they know they're going to have to pay for it in the end. Right? So they kept them that way. But it's just carried on and carried on. It's like my girlfriend's son, he's got autism and ADHD. Very, very bright, got a master's degree in chemical engineering, cannot get a job. But also part of the problem, and bless him, he's not here at the moment, but a lot of it is because in his mind, because of the way that his brain thinks, I've been told to go to university because the job at the end is there, guaranteed. Why is it I apply for jobs and they don't want to know? Because what happened? I got experience. And part of it all is because when I was a kid, and I started with my dad when I was 8 years old in the shops, a lot of them that leave university cannot open their mouths. They can open their mouth shouting and going on marches and all this sort of rubbish. But if you put them into a job interview or you tell them to have a decent conversation, they can't. They've got not a clue.
They've got no communication skills, no self-confidence, no get up and go.
No common sense whatsoever. No common sense. And, you know, and I've got my nephew, bless him, he went to uni. The best time he actually got it was when he got a job at Clark's, the shoe shop, and then suddenly his whole life opened up for him.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was that ability that has now portrayed that he's been able to move forward. And every time you look at any of these ones, it's only the ones that had a job when they were at uni that have done any good. The others, not a clue.
That's very interesting that you say that. And what they've got to do there is manage their time, because they're in the lecture hall in the afternoon and they're pulling pints in the pub in the evening.
Yeah, but it's not even the pints. It's like even if they go and work in the supermarkets or they work in the shoe shop or anything, they're talking to other people. But a lot of, I know I come up with strange conspiracy theories, a lot of it is that they make them, after they've left uni and they've got sort of very, let's say, left-wing views, what do? They turn them into school teachers to teach the younger ones again the same thing. And they just keep them in that little, a goldfish bowl, just keep them, and it just keeps going round and round. And as most people would always say, they only turn into conservatives or voting for, like, once they start paying real tax, when they turn 35 or 40. Then they think, wait a minute, I don't want to keep giving this money to this one or that one. I'm sorry. Did I ramble?
You didn't ramble. It was all gold. We didn't need Dolan's dispatch today. We had Ian's dispatch.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
You will not dare apologise, because every word was true. Ian, fascinating. Well, look, you've spoken to Julia, you've spoken to JK, but obviously the high water mark is this show in the afternoon. Thank you for our conversation. Ian, we will speak very soon. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Your calls next.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? A few months ago, I spoke to Maria in Gloucestershire, and she made a lot of great points about youth unemployment, and she's back. Hello, Maria.
Hi, Mark. Hi.
Lovely to have you back on the show. Do you remember our conversation a few months ago?
Well, I probably don't, because I've got a problem with my brain, so I can't even remember what I said yesterday.
Well, you never have a problem with your brain when we speak, because you talk a lot of sense. Now, Maria, you've got a great point to make, because we want young people to work, but there's a problem, isn't there?
Well, there is a problem. The first problem is, where are the jobs?
Correct.
The second problem is, Where are the people who are actually helping them to get into these jobs? They expect them to go from college straight into work. They haven't got that skill. So instead of doing that, part of the college course should be not 1 day work experience, it should be several months working experience somewhere, which is what's going to be with their course, whatever they're dealing with, right? So that when they do find a job, they know exactly what they're going to be doing with that job. But they go into a job and they haven't got a clue. Yeah? And it's like my grandson, he can't get a job. He wants to work in cybersecurity. He's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And he's passed every exam going. He has tried every way to get a job. He's been on so many interviews. And in the end, he didn't want to go on UC. He actually worked for Iceland. He got a job there, but he couldn't cope with it because of his autism. He can't stand all the noise and everything. And now he's looking again. But no one's helping him. He's doing it all on his own. If somebody could just help these kids, yeah, they're not doing anything to help them.
No, and yet what we are doing is spending billions paying young people to stay at home. That is not an investment, is it?
It's not an investment. We've got no engineers. We're going to have no engineers in the next 10 years. There won't be an engineer. We're going to be in right old trouble, we are. We're not going to have anybody because they're not teaching them any skills. Yeah? They're expecting them to go into stupid supplement, I don't know, whatever it is they're doing. I mean, I've got one who I've actually taken on as a favour to her to give her the work experience because she wants to work with animals. So I'm giving her, she's working with me for a couple of weeks and I will actually pay her and I'll actually give her a reference when she finishes so that it proves that she has done that work experience. And she's helping me tremendously with my animal. And she's learning loads. I'm teaching above and beyond. And she says to me, God, I didn't even know you could do that with a dog.
See?
Well, I didn't know about that, about an animal. She's learning all sorts. But they're not teaching them anything. They're teaching them why people go to a Muslim mosque. They're not teaching them how to work in a shop. They're not teaching them how to cook in a restaurant or anything. They're not giving them any skills. They're not doing anything with these kids. They are useless.
Maria, your brain is as good as ever. Let's speak soon. I remember reporting a couple of years ago on Tesco, who were spending a lot of money on school leavers who they were employing, and they were giving them basic education, mathematics, writing, arithmetic, like a finishing school, like a Swiss finishing school. They had to do it because these kids were coming out of school not able to read and write, and the supermarket was having to get them up to speed just so they could work at their local Tesco. Paul's in Tyneside. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Mark. Good to speak to you again.
You too.
So, with regards to minimum wage and stuff like that, and apprenticeships, and the young unemployed, the ones who want to stay at home. So, once you've created the minimum wage, which we've got now, and it's all been banded together, what you've done is, or what the government's done, is they've created a scenario where people daren't take on anyone. They don't want to take on an apprentice because the minimum wage, what you're going to have to pay an apprentice. Now, this is a kid who probably doesn't know anything, doesn't know how to hold a drill, a screwdriver, anything, and you run the risk. That's the key thing. You run the risk when you take this individual on, and you're going to be potentially paying somebody £300 a week just to carry your bag. And if that person decides that they don't want to do anything anymore, or they decide to go on the sick, you've got no comeback. You're stuck because of the laws which have been changed. I employ people, and I've got a space here now for somebody, and I cannot get anybody. And the people who I want, who've got semi-skill, I can't get. The apprentices, I won't go down the apprenticeship route. There is no help at all to take on an apprentice.
Really? And we're told this government have invested millions in apprenticeships. You're not feeling it. You're not seeing it, Paul.
Oh, absolutely not. And I'm only a small business, okay? I've got two sectors which I work in. I'm only a small business, manufacture and service sector. And on both, I've never seen any help whatsoever. And talking to other businesses who I deal with, everybody's the same. We're all in the same boat. We don't want to take apprentices on because it's too risky. And the kids who are coming from school, don't get us wrong, there's some outstanding individuals out there who are more than capable. But what they're being is they're being told that this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, you know. And when they come to take the job, they're almost telling you what they want to do.
Yeah.
You know? And now, when it comes to the minimum wage, how can the minimum wage go up and yet universal credit goes up more? Can you answer me that? You know, because
it's another perverse disincentive, isn't it, Paul? And I've certainly heard reports from employers saying that some young people have a different attitude to what they may have had 20 or 30 years ago, that they're not willing to turn up on time, to be dressed smartly, to put a shift in, to be a bit of a dog's body, to make the tea, to do the less attractive jobs.
Absolutely. A friend of mine, she was saying that they had a young lass come to start the apprenticeship, and they said, okay, so this is this, that, and the other. Okay, that's the tea list, and she was like, I don't make tea. And I was, well, no, no, this is what I want to do. And she wanted to go straight in the deep end before she'd even learned to swim.
It sounds like they're all little prima donnas, or some of them are. Is it because they've all been told they were geniuses since they were born and we love them so much and cuddly?
I think there's a reality check needs to be done out there.
Yeah.
Kids nowadays, and I'll be honest with you, Mark. Okay, I've said this before, and I think it was to one of your colleagues. You know, kids nowadays are no thicker than they used to be. I left school with no qualification whatsoever, and I've got my own business. I spent 35 years in the military. And, you know, they're no thicker, but the jobs aren't there. So when I was at school and they asked me with the careers officer, okay, what do you want to be? And, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to be, an astronaut. You know, you got a clip around the ear and you got told, right, reality check, son. You know, you haven't got the grades, you're not doing this, you're either going in the shipyards, down the mine, or you're going on the building sites. And I accepted that. You know, I accepted that. You know, kids nowadays, they get told you can be whatever you want to be. Every child's an achiever. Well, actually, no. Some children are more academic than others aren't. But the academic ones, chances are you wouldn't want them to put a shelf up because it'll fall off.
It's very true. Paul, loved our conversation. Really good to have you back on the show. We will speak very soon. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? What do you think? How much of this started under Tony Blair? How much of this is a legacy of New Labour and the Mickey Mouse degrees and the cult of welfarism and the open borders and the minimum wage and the command capitalist economy? We'll get the answer from the editor of the Sunday Telegraph next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? What a fantastic piece in The Telegraph today by the editor of the Sunday Telegraph. Take a listen to this headline: a hard left cataclysm is about to engulf Britain, and Blair only has himself to blame. Yes, his critique of Labour is correct, but if the UK moves to the hard left, it will be thanks to the anger caused by his own failures. It's a brilliant piece, and Alistair Heath, the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, joins me now. Hi, Alistair.
Hello. Hi there.
So we're still feeling the consequences of the new Labour regime.
Yes, I mean, I think we've lived for the last 29 years in a Blairite society. And I was very struck by the fact that there seems to be two Tony Blairs. The new Tony Blair, who is very critical, almost a conservative thinker now, criticising public policy from the right. But crucially, he's criticising the public policy of a previous Tony Blair, the man who basically ruined Britain's economies and institutions and started all of the pathologies that affect Britain today. We very much live in his legacy, and his critique basically applies to himself.
Yes, so for example, he changed the constitutional and legal framework of the country, so it's more difficult for us to, for example, deport foreign murderers and rapists. There's also the small matter of net zero, of which he appears to be a furious critic, except that he, as you point out in your article, pretty much got that ball in motion.
Yes, well, exactly. Who was the man who started mass immigration? It was Tony Blair. Who was the man who broke Britain's trust when it came to handling mass immigration, who massively underplayed what the numbers would be like when the European Union extended itself to Eastern European states all those years ago? Well, it was Tony Blair again. So it's very easy for Blair, who of course was the main supporter of the new legal order in which we all live, with the Human Rights Act and all those sorts of laws that empower the quangocracy and the judges, to now say we've got to do everything we can to fight back against the small boats. But it's his legacy, his system, his legalistic order that is to blame. And exactly the same thing applies to net zero. The whole, net zero originated with the Climate Change Act, and it was Blair who originally proposed it. It came into law a couple of years later under Gordon Brown, and it was obviously turbocharged by the Tories. But the origins of all this command and control net zero stuff, or drastic targets to reduce carbon that are now creating the sorts of problems that Blair himself points out, well, Tony Blair himself is to blame. So it's very easy for Blair to deliver an almost centre-right intervention, as he has. But the reality is we live in a Blairite world. And, Tony Blair himself, Gordon Brown, and then the coalition government and the Conservatives continued this order, reinforced this order, turbocharged many of his pathologies. And, we live in that world today.
Yes, we're taking blood supply management lectures from Count Dracula, aren't we? That's the issue we've got. Why do you think that several Conservative Prime Ministers, including David Cameron and Theresa May, kept faith with this Blairite consensus? Why didn't they tear up the whole paradigm when they got into power?
Well, exactly, yes. Not only did they not tear it up, they reinforced it in every possible way. They extended devolution, this weird one-sided devolution that plagues this country, whereby local apparatchiks are given lots of power, lots of money to spend, but no responsibility, for example. And they continue to re-regulate the economy, to sign up to new forms of red tape, to tax the rich, to impose more and more restrictive reductions in carbon emissions, all that sort of stuff. It was all Blairite. So why, as you ask, did they fall into that trap? Well, I think it was twofold. The first, at the beginning at least, they thought Blair had cracked it. They thought Blair was a miracle worker, that his model worked, and that the original Tory critique in 97, 98, 99, that kind of time, from William Hague in those days and others, well, they thought that critique had failed, had been disproved. They were convinced that Blairism had actually shown that you can have social democracy, lots of economic growth, and a happy public. And don't forget, Blair was re-elected triumphantly in 2001. So that was the first issue. And the second issue is, but by, after 10, 20 years of all of this, the entire establishment had become Blairite. All the institutions had become Blairite. All the metrics were the sorts of soft left metrics. For example, everyone became obsessed with
equality, for example. Every tax measure had to be assessed looking upon whether or not it reduced equality, or reduced inequality, I mean, whether it affected the rich more than the poor, that sort of stuff. So we were trapped in this Blairite cycle, this Blairite vicious cycle, and only now are we about to come out of it. And I think today the choice for Britain is, either you shift to the right and you have a restoration, a radical right-wing government of one kind or another, or you move dramatically to the left and you end up with Andy Burnham or worse, a group of people who believe in wealth taxes, death taxes, rejoining the EU, all that sorts of stuff. And I think Blair is panicking. Blair realizes that, our society is soon about to have to make this very important choice. And he probably realizes, within himself at least, that he set up the foundations for the nightmare in which we live today.
Well, if you look at it, and your piece in the Telegraph today is fascinating, you can add to that list stealth taxes, those horrible PFI deals, the invention or a reinvention at least of political spin, the cult of welfarism, net zero, the globalist mindset, the something for nothing society. It all started under Blair. Why is he not judged more harshly by history? Everyone focuses on the war in Iran as a way of criticising him, but there's much besides that. Iraq.
Yes, I think, yes. I think the reason is that there were tensions within the Blairite agenda, within the New Labour agenda. There was this huge division between the Blairites and the Brownites. And it's very easy, with the benefit of hindsight, to blame everything on Gordon Brown, on the Brownites, and to say it was them that, created this culture of welfarism by massively inventing and extending tax credits, for example. And there's a lot of truth in that, but the problem is Blair was in charge. Blair was the Prime Minister. He was responsible. It's like if you suddenly said, something that happened under Rishi Sunak wasn't Rishi Sunak's fault, or under Boris Johnson wasn't Boris Johnson's fault, and so on. It has to be attributed to whoever's Prime Minister. You can't simply just blame the Chancellor. And I think the original premise of one kind of Blairism was actually very radical and very interesting. It was this idea that the Blairite agenda was to actually extend and entrench the Thatcherite revolution and the Renaissance that Britain had gone through in the 1980s. And the idea was that Blairism would introduce far more market mechanisms to things like the NHS. It would reform welfare, reform planning. It would bring in radical people who weren't really on the left anymore, like Frank Field or Alan Milburn. Alan Milburn became health secretary. Frank Field was briefly in charge of welfare reform. It was this whole idea that the left was going to reinvent itself. And just like in, for example, when Bill Clinton in America put through welfare reform, or in New Zealand, the Labour Party under Roger Douglas introduced mass privatisations and deregulation and so on. There was this whole hope, on the right at least, that this form of Blairism would triumph. The problem is it failed. Blair didn't deliver on that. There was this big battle in 97, 98, 99, and the Brownites won. The command and control traditional lefties won. And we gradually went back onto the course of higher and higher taxes, more and more regulation, all that sort of stuff. And what the Blairism could have achieved, it never did. And instead, it focused on ushering in a massive legal and technocratic revolution whereby huge amounts of power were removed from Parliament and put into unaccountable institutions. They created the Supreme Court. Obviously, they signed up to the Human Rights Act. Quangos grew and blossomed everywhere. And even quite good reforms like Bank of England independence ended up empowering technocrats and reducing democratic accountability. So the Blairite dream failed. Blair's legacy is a disastrous legacy, and one of his great legacies was to destroy the old Conservative Party, right? Because he contaminated the minds of the Cameroon Conservative Party, and they saw themselves as Blairites, maybe not Brownites, but Blairites, and they kept it all going.
They discarded Thatcher and adopted Blair as the standard bearer for modern conservatism.
Yes, it was.
They
absolutely
repudiated
insane.
Thatcher, didn't they?
Yes, and it was a catastrophe.
by
yes,
action.
Yes, well, they did, yes. After we've had 29 years of this now, well, since 97, and quite a lot more since Thatcher left in 1990. And basically, the Thatcherite Renaissance was this incredible period in modern British history.
And the promise of Thatcherism, has been torched, has been completely relinquished.
Yes, and so now we're left cheering, supposedly, a man who talks about AI and allowing us to drill in the North Sea a little bit and doing a few bits and pieces. So we have fallen very far. And, in comparison with non-entities like Keir Starmer or, Andy Burnham and so on, Tony Blair is a giant, of course. But the sorts of policies he's advocating at the moment are quite bland, quite minor. They're the sorts of things that everyone on the right has been calling for years. They probably won't happen. And in reality, they don't address the core roots of the issue, which is this 29-year Blairite hegemony in Britain, which has unravelled our entire economic, social and cultural model.
You've helped me massively, Alistair, because I've been asking guest after guest for months, if not years now, why did the Conservatives shift leftwards in power? Why have they become, to quote Anne Widdecombe, institutionally woke? And I think you've given me the answer. It's the ghost and myth of Tony Blair. Can we ever escape this legacy now? Because, as you know, we have Starmer in post, who can't even get 5 billion quid's worth of modest cuts to benefit payments for people on welfare who are disabled. 5 billion quid he can't get past his backbenchers. And then the prospect of Andy Burnham coming in, who will shift further leftwards. So where does this go in the future? Can we get back to Thatcher's Britain?
Well, I think, yes, we can. I think we should have started on that journey in 2016. The whole point of Brexit was to reject the entire Blairite consensus. It was an emphatic, dramatic rejection of the Blairite failures and the Blairite model. Unfortunately, our political class didn't acknowledge this, and they doubled down. So we've ended up with even more of those problems. And now there's a really, really important choice, which is, do we re-adopt full socialism? Do we go back to the 70s or even the 1910s, with Lloyd George and so on? Do we try and blow up our society to impose left-wing dogmas on our country? For example, massive wealth taxation, land value tax, massive death taxes, all that kind of thing, which is really where the Burnham agenda is going. If he becomes Prime Minister, that's the sort of place he'll want to go. He might want electoral reform to prevent the right from ever winning an election ever again. He'll want to rejoin the EU, all that sort of stuff. Or on the other side, do you adopt a restorationist agenda, a real conservative agenda, and you end up with a right-wing government? The big question there is, would any of those parties on the right, the Tories on reform, be competent enough to undo the entire Blairite infrastructure, which, is a huge, huge, monumental task, which will require a very large number of very intelligent, very dedicated people working on that for years. So that is really the choice facing this country. And in my opinion, the Blairite equilibrium is gone. We've had 30 years of this nightmare. We're going to have to choose, do we move further to the left or do we move to the right? I don't know what we'll choose. I think if Andy Burnham wins that by-election, the chances are we will start moving quite a lot more quickly to the left. Keir Starmer was already the most left-wing Prime Minister we've had since the 1970s. Andy Burnham will be much worse. And in fact, any of the other possible contenders with a chance of winning the Labour Party leadership would be far worse. So, that is a question.
Briefly, Alistair, what does the future hold for my viewers and listeners and for this great country, your readers at the Sunday Telegraph? What does the future hold if Britain does choose the leftward path and we have perhaps coalition governments for the foreseeable future which are progressive centre-left?
I think it would be a catastrophe. I think we would move from a society that's already barely growing at all in terms of GDP per capita to one that's actually declining. I think there'll be an exodus of wealth creators and entrepreneurs and billionaires. They'll all leave. There'll be nobody left.
I think, tax receipts will dry up, so taxes will have to go up all the time just to kind of pay for the latest programs. And crucially, the left-wing consensus, the so-called soft left consensus, but I call it a hard left socialist consensus, is that you've got to tax property and wealth a lot more. So, council tax will, people will start paying £10,000, £15,000, £20,000 a year in council tax or equivalent or more. There'll be massive increases in inheritance tax. Normal average households will start paying massive amounts of inheritance tax. It'll be dressed up as some sort of levy to pay for social care or something. And you're going to have this huge increase in the size and power of the state. And I just don't think our society will put up with that. And, the structures of our society are based on self-reliance, on conservative values, on entrepreneurship, on attracting global capital, on being the host to the City of London and to a big tech industry, which is basically large American, lots of foreign direct investment. We can't cope with this kind of socialism. So I'm afraid to say there'll be massive economic turmoil ahead and massive social turmoil ahead if we go down that road. And none of the pathologies of our country, low growth, a very poor health service, a culture of rampant welfarism, excessive immigration, the growth of extremism, all that sort of stuff. None of that stuff would be resolved. Not a single one of those issues would be tackled by shifting to the left. We will only make everything worse. The only answer is to attack rightwards. But for that, you need a right-wing party to win an election and to be super, super competent and super disciplined and not end up, either just imploding or falling back on comfortable Blairite consensus views of the world.
Most definitely. What a privilege to have you on the show. Alistair, thank you for your valuable time. What a brilliant piece it is. Check it out in the Telegraph this afternoon. Alistair Heath there is the editor of the Sunday Telegraph. Your reaction, 0344 499 1000. Are we still living with the legacy of Blair? This is Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Tim is in Hartlepool. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. Top of the afternoon to you. How's your Thursday going, sir?
It's going great, and there's a lot of talk, isn't it, about the NEETs, and I feel dreadfully kind of sorry for them, primarily because we're looking at a very, very near-term future of in advanced AI and then AGI and then quantum. All of these things are going to just more or less wipe out the knowledge-based workforce that we've grown used to. And yet you've got wonderful young people sat there not knowing what to do with their careers when there will be quite a long-term sustainable future in learning trades and skills that go on in environments that are just too complex for AI, humanoids, that kind of thing. So
construction, plumbing, being an electrician, sparks, that kind of thing. Those jobs will never be replaced by AI, will they?
Never. And you've got youngsters here that are just not knowing apparently what they could ever do.
Well, I totally agree. So how do we fix this, Tim?
Well, I think the government needs to grab hold of the reins and start to encourage youngsters to take on trades, but basically go to college to learn. For example, I mean, whenever I need an electrician, I have to call one in because I'm just sort of pretty terrified about the thought of messing about with electricity. So these are complex jobs and trades. They're no longer the sort of second grade skill sets that we always associate them as. For example, I can imagine now a scenario where you've got the ex-redundant accountant living next door to the electrician who's having a great life doing things AI can't do.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that's where young people are caught up in a perfect storm, aren't they, Tim? Because we exist in a business environment where companies have a disincentive to hire young folk, and a lot of those jobs are being replaced by AI anyway.
Absolutely. So my view is it should be college. It should be, you know, educationally led, so the youngsters get pre-prepared for the kinds of work careers that they're going to face when they're 15 and 16, and they totally understand that if they want money, if they want the holidays, they want the house, they want the car, these things are aspirational things that they can get those, but they've got to go and get a trade. It won't be suitable for everybody, and we will need universal basic income to level things out as AI replaces human tasks. But humans are very tenacious. They love a challenge. And I think the first thing we've got to do, though, is acknowledge that, a U-bend underneath a sink in a Victorian house is never going to be fixed by a robot.
Too right. And we're going down the toilet, aren't we? Tim, thank you for that. Well, as you imply, we survived the Industrial Revolution, so we're probably going to survive the AI one as well, but things are going to change. We will have to adapt. Tim says, get young people trained in practical skills. Jill's in Cornwall. Hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Happy Thursday. Has it cooled down a little bit? Because I've noticed in the capital there's a little bit of a breeze, which I very much welcome.
Well, it's very hot where I am.
Really? Still?
Yes, very. There is a bit of a breeze, but it's still incredibly hot. Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, listen, and are you boiling with rage about youth unemployment?
Well, yes, I am to some extent, simply because there's all this pressure put on teachers and the police and various different institutions and what have you.
Yeah.
And yet, I wish parents were more accountable for their children, or what their children do or don't do. You know, I listen to the news and I hear about children in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock, walking around the cities with knives and goodness knows what. And we keep putting a lot of pressure on teachers to do more than just teach ABCs and what have you. They're now having to sort of toilet train and goodness knows what.
I know.
And the police are also made to sort of take the responsibility of young people growing up and what have you. And I never hear, I wish I heard more about what parents are doing.
I'm really glad you said that, Jill, because we expect the teachers and the police officers and the social workers to deal with a kind of, basically wipe everyone's bum and pick up the fragments of a broken society. That's not their job, is it? The teacher's job is to teach you maths and, English and literacy, all of that. The police officer's job is to arrest shoplifters and burglars, and a social worker's job is to protect people in society. It's not their job to sort this other stuff out.
No, it's not. It's down to the parents. The parents should be the one that's teaching the children how to get a job, how to be responsible, how to grow up, how to look after yourself, all these sort of things that you should be learning from home. We're now placing the responsibility on on other institutions, schools, doctors, teachers, you name it.
Oh, the NHS as well? I mean, look at the state of A&E, Jill. Right? You go to your local A&E department and there is your broken society, and it's got nothing to do with being ill.
No, I used to work in a hospital in North Devon many years ago, and I've just come through the system with illness myself because I had cancer and I had to spend a lot of time in hospitals and what have you.
Oh my gosh!
And yeah, I know. But I just feel that the responsibility when I hear on the news about a young person being stabbed by a 14-year-old with a knife at 12 o'clock at night. I mean, where are the parents with this 14-year-old? Why aren't they made? Why doesn't the justice system make the parents responsible for the actions of their children? Because that is how it should be.
Jill, you are right. The buck stops with Mum and Dad. Really enjoyed your call, and stay cool in Cornwall. I'm surprised it's toasty there because the capital's got very, very fresh. I was a little bit cold last night. Who knew? Jill, we shall speak soon. Here's a voice note from Hev.
Everybody's going on about youngsters not having work and jobs and stuff. I know it's very hard, but it always has been hard to a degree. But what's the matter with them going out and earning their benefits, like cleaning the streets, clearing the drains, painting graffiti out or scrubbing graffiti off the walls, it all goes towards helping the councils out as well. Surely it's going to save money that way instead of paying the kids benefits and then also paying somebody to do all the cleaning in your community. I mean, surely, everybody gets money from the benefit system should have some kind of input. That's what I think anyway. But I do also think a lot of parents these days need to be a bit harder on their kids and kick their backsides.
Well, it's a bit of tough love, isn't it, Hev? I've always thought the word no is a word of love. Can I have ice cream before dinner? No. Can I stay up till 2 a.m? No. Can I raid the drinks cabinet? I'm 15. No. The word no is a word of love when you are a parent. They are your kids, not your friends. Here's another voice note, and this is from Diane.
Hi, Mark. Just wanted to add to the business of working when you're young. My first Saturday job was 9 till 6 for £1. My office job for a full week, that was 40 hours, was £9. And oh, the excitement when you got a rise to £2 more. They don't understand that now because they just think they're entitled to what they're being given. Just a thought. Bye.
Diane, you are so right. It's human nature to be incentivised. You work hard, you get your rewards. You cannot have a something-for-nothing society. And it all started with COVID, being paid to stay at home. You're a victim. This is the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague, it was not. And the legacy isn't just a mountain of debts and depleted public services and a rather depressed, unproductive country. The great legacy is a mental health crisis among young people and a tsunami of literally youth unemployment, the highest in Europe. My son is about to finish his third year in college as an electrician, but no apprenticeships, says Chris in Wales. And that's everywhere I ask. People and companies are not taking on apprentices. And it's a tragedy, isn't it? It's not by accident, folks. It's not Brexit or Donald Trump's tariffs. It is two ruinous budgets. Lots more to come. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 3. Lots to get through this hour. And breaking this afternoon, this is a very concerning story, I've got to say. Labour is risking a lost generation of jobless young people, as a landmark report warns. 1 in 6 could be out of work by 2030 unless there is major welfare reform. What is the problem? What has happened? Who's to blame? Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Now, Faith is taking your calls today. Book your place on the show. Amy's pressing the buttons. The brilliant Finlay is the executive producer of the show today. And directing our TV output, none other than Luke himself. Love it when Luke's in the hot seat. I've never looked better. If you want to see the show, head over to YouTube, search Talking Up We Pop. We're on the radio. We're massive everywhere. This is Talk. And speaking of massive, how about this? The share of babies born to migrant parents reached 40% for the first time last year, according to new figures. Latest Office for National Statistic figures showed the number of newborns with at least one parent born abroad had risen from 39.5% in 2024 to a record high of 40.2% last year. It was just 30% in 2008. So that equates to more than 235,000 of the 500,000 births last year. What does this mean? Why is it happening? Let's get the views first of Dr. Stephen J. Shaw, demographer and producer of the very compelling series Birth Gap. The series The Birth Gap examines declining birth rates globally through personal interviews and data across 24 countries, exploring causes and consequences. More details on Birth Gap to come. Dr. Stephen Shaw, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
It's lovely to have you with us. So first of all, your reaction to these figures that we're seeing in the UK?
Well, there's always a story behind the numbers, and those are the stories that I really try and dive into. And birth rate data these days, almost globally, is deeply worrying. What I've just seen for the UK in the past couple of hours looking at these numbers is something that worries me more than the immigration numbers necessarily. It's the fact that mothers are really having fewer children than we have seen in decades. Mothers have been incredibly resilient since the 70s in the UK and elsewhere, having generally the same number of children as their parents, around 2.3 on average. That's down to 2.1 the past 3-4 years. We're looking at a point where we may be hit with a double whammy: fewer people becoming parents, and now perhaps the sign of smaller families.
Why do you think women are having fewer children, Stephen?
Well, yeah, and of course, as people, we talk a lot about women because we've got data on women so much more than men, and that's unfortunate. So why are people having so few children?
Because there might be, your argument is there might be women who would like to have babies, but they need a man to help out.
Well, it takes two, ultimately, in almost all cases. And the issue is right now, we are getting together later and later in life. The other key number for me today from the ONS is that the average age a woman has her first child is 29.6. It's approaching a magic number of 30. That's first child. And that number is really a magic number you don't want to be if you look at countries like South Korea, where that average age has crept up to 32 now. UK's really not that many years away from reaching that area. What happens is simply people don't meet the partner at the right time. They go through a breakup. All sorts of other things can happen along the way too. But the longer you delay settling down, having that first child, automatically we know that will mean fewer parents.
Do you think political philosophies have influenced these numbers, Stephen, such as feminism and the idea that actually for a woman a career might be more valuable and important than having a family?
It's absolutely not as simple as that at all. One of the most remarkable things for me is when you look at data. Again, I live in Japan. I study 24 countries intimately in terms of long-term birth rate trends. When you go through shifts in social culture and education levels for women, all of these things, mothers, again, to make the same point, I think it's worth doing. Mothers tend to have exactly the same number of children through all of those things. What simply happens is more and more people perhaps choose not to have children, though the data shows that that's a really very small number overall. It's people missing out. So you could say, yes, that social, political changes have influenced this, but why is it? It's because they have directly or indirectly incentivized delayed parenthood. People do other things in their 20s now. And for many of those people, sadly, they believe they may still have time. 30 seems an entirely reasonable time to start a family. But that's not what the data says.
Stephen, is money a problem as well? There are couples, aren't there, that feel they can't afford to have children. They're saving up for a deposit for their home. Maybe they're paying very high levels of rent. Well, in the UK, they most certainly are. So how much of this is financial?
This is where people start to throw things at me, because all of the data really shows is that the more money people have, the fewer children they have. And that's really linked again to delayed parenthood. You earn a little bit more money. You get to a point in life where you can afford things. You can afford vacations and maybe wardrobes that you couldn't afford before. And therefore, for me, it's not so much money, it's prioritization. I think prioritizations have changed. There's things we want to do now, things that take money. And again, we're living in this bubble where we think it's perfectly reasonable to hope to meet someone, settle down and start that family in our 30s. And again, the data is just very clear.
Well, Stephen, I don't think people should throw things at you for speaking the truth and stating facts. That's really fascinating, that actually it's perhaps poorer families that are still churning them out thick and fast.
Yeah, but you have to go to certain parts of the world to really see this. When people look at, we can choose countries like India, which just surprises people, has a birth rate of around 2 children per woman. Not that different to the UK 20, 30 years ago. India's birth rates are low, but if you look at the poorer areas inside India, that's where you're finding larger families. The same in sub-Saharan Africa. So it is a case of the greater link is with poverty.
And Stephen, here in the UK, we're seeing these figures from ethnic Brits who appear to be having more and more families. So we've just got that headline figure. The share of babies born to migrant parents reached 40% for the first time last year. There are people that will argue that that's a big change in society. What's your view on that?
Oh, well, it is. And I'm sorry to say, it's really an unstoppable one. I don't take a view on immigration. I'm lucky to advise governments from those nations like Japan who would have really had minimal immigration for decades, and those who encourage it. All have got low birth rate issues. It may help solve your problem shorter term. It may help your GDP short term, but immigrants get older, they need supported into their, the elder years, of course.
Yeah.
So you need more immigrants and more. So the increasing numbers you're seeing now of births from immigrants is a natural consequence of inviting people, which the UK has done, for whatever you think of that, from different parts of the world. And what we see in the data generally, I haven't seen it for the ONS today, but what we see generally is that some cultures from other countries have children younger. And when you're younger, you tend to have more people becoming parents and larger families to an extent. So I'm expecting more of this.
I mean, I think there's a tension, isn't there? Because there's an issue around national identity and cultural issues, integration, that sort of thing. And if you've got very, very high levels of immigration that are historically unprecedented, that I think comes at a societal price. On the other hand, if we're running out of babies, do we need to welcome migrants having kids here? How do we square that circle?
Yeah, well, it's my view is very clear on this. You'll never solve the birth rate phenomenon crisis with immigration, because it's perpetual. You need to lock into forever immigration to make up for the children you're not having. Immigrants don't bring the birth rate up enough in a generation, so you need more and more and more. And with global birth rates in the same cycle as we are, just at different stages, including sub-Saharan Africa, we're going to run out of potential immigrants.
So that's fascinating. So imagine that. Wait till Nigel Farage finds out. So you're saying that if immigrants come to the UK, them having lots of babies doesn't really fix the demographic time bomb of an ageing society. What we need is indigenous Brits, the Brits that are here, to have more kids, 3, 4, 5 kids.
You know, I would love to see any nation in the situation the UK is now have a referendum. What do you want for your future? You know, there's a choice here. There's a choice to support short to mid-term GDP, or there's a choice to perhaps, like Japan and other nations, perhaps promote your culture in some way if that's important to you. What upsets me is that people don't know that that choice is being made for them today. And, you know, to me, it's sad that only now we're starting to talk about this issue.
Yes, well, Stephen, you're speaking with great wisdom and great authority and great honesty about this issue. Just briefly, on countries like Japan, where they've protected national identity, culture and tradition, which I think is the way to go. It's a very homogenous, successful society. The flip side of that is that are they not facing the worst demographic time bomb of all because of that approach?
Well, yes, but it's not quite as simple as it's painted. Yeah, I mean, Japan is fortunately able to do this in part because it's a wealthy nation. It's able to, therefore, you know, maintain certain standards, but it is now hitting a demographic cliff. However, because there's been so little immigration historically, the number of older people in Japan is about to plummet. They're going to enter this new phase where there will be a much smaller, you know, over 50, over 80 generation who will need less and less spent on them for healthcare. So the idea that we've solved it really is, to me, it's a fool's game. No one solved this. Japan's got a crisis facing them, but so do countries who have focused on immigration. It's just a little bit further away.
Stephen, it's been a deep privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Is the series Birth Gap, is that on YouTube?
Yep, you can watch it and you can visit Japan and 24 other countries and find out what's happening right now on YouTube.
Well, Stephen, this won't be the last time we speak. I'm so grateful for your time and your knowledge and expertise. Dr. Stephen J. Shaw, demographer and producer of the YouTube series Birth Gap, which I shall be consuming, probably, what do they call it, binge watching later today. Rakib Ahsan is a very old friend of mine and a social policy analyst. How are you, Rakib?
How are you, Mark? I'm doing well.
I can't decide if this is good news or bad news. The share of babies born to migrant parents reached 40% for the first time last year. I think it's a concern for national identity. That said, we need babies. So how do you square that circle?
Well, I think we should get away from thinking, is this a good thing or a bad thing, and just see it for what it is and why we are in this particular situation. There's no doubt in my mind, Mark, in recent times we've experienced industrial scale immigration, the unprecedented level of immigration in recent times, especially after the post-Brexit liberalisation of visa rules under the former Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But we have to also understand that we've changed a great deal as a country in terms of our national culture. I believe that when you look at the mainstream, for example, if you want to call it the indigenous mainstream, that is rapidly secularized. And in some ways, I'd say that the institution of marriage has suffered as a result of that. I do think there's been a rise of this certain individualism where people ultimately prioritize their own individual wants, their own personal freedom. And Mark, you'll know better than most that ultimately when it comes to getting married, having children, a degree of personal sacrifice is involved. It's not just all about you. It's ultimately you put your own family before your own individual interests, desires and wants. And I think that that's been somewhat lost in recent times. And that's naturally going to impact on the kind of demographic data that we're seeing right now.
Well, I agree with you there. And so, I mean, how do we approach this going forward? What should policymakers be doing, do you think, Rakib?
Well, I think firstly, we need to wean ourselves off this immigration over-reliance. I think that the political establishment, they've been addicted. There's this long-term addiction to mass immigration, and the country needs to be rehabilitated on the back of that. I think, but there's also a limit to how much policymakers can do. I think that we need some kind of cultural sea change. And I think that means social conservatives harnessing the power of social media, the rise of technology as well, to try and press forward a more conservative message, which is more pro-family, which is more pro-community as well. So I think there's a limit here in terms of really looking at the state. The state can introduce pro-natalist policies, more family-friendly policies, whether that's in terms of introducing greater rights for parents, and also providing them with greater flexibility, which allows them to have a healthier work-family balance. But ultimately, there has to be a discussion in terms of civil society, in terms of how do we really cultivate more pro-family attitudes within the mainstream, which at the moment, I think there's many people there who are relatively individualistic compared to what I'd consider to be relatively socially conservative migrant communities across the country.
Most definitely. Just briefly, Rakib, before we get to the Boris wave,
sure.
I disagreed with Stephen. I really enjoyed having my previous guest on. He spoke very, very well. A very interesting guy that's looking at demography.
Sure.
But we were talking about various aspects of immigration. And we were talking about the economy. And he said, well, actually, quite often the more affluent a couple become, the fewer kids they do have, because they've got a nice car, which they're paying for slowly. They take skiing holidays, etc., maybe a second home. But I'm not so sure, because I think one of the issues, if young people can't get on the housing ladder, I believe that's a barrier to becoming parents. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I think it's about, and I think interestingly, I think the point we have to make here, Mark, is that because we're an international hotspot when it comes to family breakdown, that means that there's a splitting of households, and that actually puts further pressure in terms of our housing supply. And that's something that's overlooked. Naturally, industrial scale immigration doesn't help with that, but neither does our sort of a family instability crisis in the country. There's no doubt that if we had a greater housing supply and there's more affordable housing, I think that would help with family formation. But again, it goes back to those cultural attitudes as well. You can create the favorable conditions, but ultimately people have to take it on themselves to say, well, actually, in the spirit of self-sacrifice almost, I do want to get married and I do want to build a family of my own. And that's not something that can necessarily be achieved overnight, that cultural sea change. And we need to really invest in that as a civil society.
Most definitely. Well, if I was embarking on having a family now, I wouldn't want to be at the mercy of my landlord, who could double the rent unexpectedly.
Exactly.
or chuck me out, notwithstanding the government's latest changes to renters' rights. Rakib, the Boris wave. Between 2021 and 2024, 4.2 million people entered the country as the UK opened its doors to hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong people, Ukrainians and others. Meanwhile, thousands of small boats continue to land on our shores. The Boris wave, has it been good or bad for Britain?
Well, I think firstly, I think we need to look at various streams of migration. I don't think the issue here really Hong Kongers fleeing Chinese state tyranny or Ukrainians fleeing the Kremlin war machine. I think much of the Boris wave actually we're looking at very high levels of inward migration from countries such as India, Pakistan and Nigeria. Countries, by the way, which have significant problems when it comes to communalism, religious strife, serious issues in terms of social cohesion more generally within those countries. I also feel that when you look at the Boris wave, I think we were promised ultimately a post-Brexit immigration system which should promote the brightest and the best. They would be encouraged to enter the country. And I have to say that's not been reflected in recent streams of migration. I think more than anything, we're relatively low-skilled, not necessarily high in terms of educational attainment. So I think we also have to look at, I know it might sound quite crude, but you have to look at the economic quality of recent levels of migration overall. And at the moment, I'd say that we have a very lax immigration system, which needs to be far more rigorous and selective when it comes to the migrants who arrive in the UK.
Most definitely. And I agree with you, Rakib. I agree with you as the son of immigrants myself from Ireland. You are an ethnic British man. And we both agree there's nothing wrong with immigration. It has to be the right amount and the right quality.
No, absolutely. Listen, I'm a Bangladeshi heritage. I was born to a foreign-born mother. But the reality is you have to acknowledge the situation that the country finds itself in. And at the moment, immigration is a very serious problem in terms of the way it's being managed. If you look at recent YouGov polling data, around 7 in 10 Brits believe that immigration has been too high over the last decade or so.
Including lefties.
Exactly, because I think that many people on the left would see that ultimately immigration is being used as a way by corporations, as a way of chipping at workers' rights. Just cheap foreign labour is ultimately being used to mask over our youth worklessness crisis in the country, and that's not remotely sustainable, and it's certainly not pro-British to adopt that kind of approach.
Brilliant as always, Rakib. Catch up soon. Rakib Hassan is a social policy analyst. We've been talking for years. He always makes so much sense. Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? This is Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. The time is 3:24. Lovely to have your company. What about this shocking story of Henry Nowak, 18 years of age, described as a soft, gentle soul who lit up a room? Well, as he lay bleeding to death in the middle of a residential street in Southampton, his wrists were chained together by handcuffs. Police officers who thought they were coming to his aid had fallen for the lies of his attacker, a 23-year-old Sikh man who claimed the 18-year-old had racially abused him. This individual, Vikram Digwa, had in fact stabbed Nowak, a finance student, 4 times with an 8-inch ceremonial knife. As the teenager, unable to breathe, as his lungs filled with blood, he begged officers for help. They ignored his pleas and placed him under arrest. He died less than an hour later. Well, Digba has now been found guilty of murder after a 2-week trial at Southampton Crown Court. So you've got a lad, he's been stabbed, the police come and they handcuff the stab victim. Make it make sense. Colin Sutton is a retired murder senior investigating officer and now Reform UK policing and crime advisor. Hello, Colin.
Hello, Mark.
What has happened here in regard to the policing of this crime?
The magic word was used, I think, is the problem. There is nothing...
The R word.
Yeah. There is nothing, it's not just the police, but in any kind of organisation, now be it public or private, the worst thing that can happen to you is being accused of being a racist or any kind of ist.
Yeah.
And I think it causes, we've got a culture now that we've allowed to develop whereby just the use of that word makes ordinary, reasonable, sane and sensible people lose their sense of proportion, lose their sense of what's right. And, I obviously, it's completely the wrong thing to happen. A police officer's duty is always first to try and preserve life before anything else. But it just goes to show that, there is such a culture of fear now around these kind of identitarian issues that as soon as somebody raises it, a different mindset sets in. And I think we know, that as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence at all that Henry Nowak was racist. It looks like Vikram Digwa has deliberately used that lie. The deputy chief constable said police were lied to. Well, people do lie to police. It's a fact of life. But he chose to use a particular sort of lie because he appreciated that would have the maximum impact and skew the action that was being taken by those police.
I mean, that to a degree, Colin, is in an indirect way perversion of the course of justice, isn't it? That ought to be an aggravating factor in his sentence.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with that at all. It's a thoroughly despicable thing to do, in the context even of having just stabbed somebody 4 or 5 times with an 8-inch knife.
It's extraordinary. So this story tells us there is a problem in the culture of policing. How much is it cultural, Colin, and how much is it that the cops have to do this?
I don't think that there is deliberate, explicit instructions to behave in that way. But I think it's well known that, as I said earlier, the worst thing almost that can happen to you as a police officer is to be accused of being racist. The demerit that you will get against your record going forward, any hopes of promotion or other things like that, it would count against you. And this is the culture of fear that we've engendered, that we've allowed to happen. And it's clouding judgment in situations like this, because if you took those police officers absent the allegation of racism and said, look, you turn up at this scene and this is going on, I guarantee 99% of officers would say the first thing you do is to make sure that nobody has been stabbed, make sure that you're preserving life, make sure that medical assistance is called, because that's your first duty. But suddenly, by using the magic word, judgment is clouded. So, and that's what we need to attack. That's what we need to address.
We really do. And I'll come to how we do that in a moment, Colin. Was it clear? Because I don't have the full details of the case. We're still processing what happened, Colin. We've got the guilty verdict now for this individual of murder. But was it known to the police that this poor lad was actually potentially fatally injured? Did they know about the knife wound? Do we know?
I don't think we know for sure. From my reading of what's been going on, there's a suggestion that Henry actually told the officers, I've been stabbed. He's stabbed me.
You would, wouldn't you?
Well, I think so, yeah.
It would come up in conversation. As they're cuffing you, it might come up in conversation that you're bleeding to death without being flippant about this, Colin.
No, and we shouldn't be flippant, and we're not being flippant.
No.
But the fact is that, even if you're handcuffing somebody, you still have a responsibility to try and take care of them, and you need to make sure that they haven't got any injuries like that. And it's something like a period of, we were told today by the Deputy Chief Constable, 3 minutes, and we're also told that the medical advice is it wouldn't have made any difference. But I think that's a red herring, really. It's the principle of what went on that we need to look at, and that is that officers must not be scared to do their duty, and their first duty is to preserve life. And so no matter what anyone says or what allegations are made, they need to have the confidence that they're going to put that to one side and say, no, first of all, we're going to make sure no one's going to die here.
Most definitely. And Colin, you and I can agree, racism is the most despicable thing. It's an evil stain on humanity. But do we really want to live in a country where someone gets arrested and handcuffed for saying a racist thing? Do you even want to go there?
I would think not. My personal view would be not. And what I want not to see more than that, I suppose, is the fact that that because there is this culture around that word and that allegation, that it is used mischievously, it is used to affect situations as it was in this case. I think that's a very dangerous and slippery slope to go upon.
It most definitely is. And of course, it is this political correctness that you've correctly identified, Colin. Call it woke, call it, community tensions. All of these euphemisms allow criminals to evade justice on an industrial scale. A good example would be the grooming gangs. And the things that happen in South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, across the country, happened. Upwards of perhaps 250,000 girls raped and abused because of political correctness. Because, you had coppers arresting the girls sometimes who were labelled prostitutes. Well, you can't be a prostitute if you're 14 years of age.
No, absolutely. You shouldn't leave London out of that list either, because despite what the mayor's, it went on in London. I know that.
Sadiq Khan didn't get the memo, but it's happened in the capital too, yeah.
Well, he pretended he didn't even know what was being talked about, but that's another issue. But yeah, it's right. We cannot let the fear of one sort of allegation trump or sort of diminish the threat and other things that have gone on. We need to accept what our society is. We need to accept how we are, but also we need to make sure that people aren't allowed to play the system and escape the justice they deserve because they happen to be able to claim one sort of ism or other.
Most definitely. So, Colin, before we let you go, and I'm so grateful for your time, lovely to see you again. You are Reform UK's Policing and Crime Advisor. What would you advise a future Reform UK Home Secretary to do? How can we have police officers that are able to do their job never in fear of being called racist or any career consequences? How do we make that happen?
We have some plans. We've got plans for that already. We don't like the idea of mandatory training for DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion.
So scrap that so that the nonsense woke mind virus is not in their head in the first place.
Yeah, and
the brainwashing.
Yeah, exactly. But what I particularly want to do, and I think is very important, when we talk about two-tier policing, and that's gone on, the debate's gone on for the last 18 months or 2 years about that, what we need to do is to make sure that we police speech in a fair, transparent way. So I'd actually like to replace that training with training on freedom of speech, because I'm not sure all officers are absolutely aware of the laws around freedom of speech. And I think if we were to say, this is the line. One side of it, that's hate, that's incitement, they're crimes. That's ridicule, that's being offensive, that's being nasty, that's not a crime. Here's the line, and we're going to police it rigidly.
I think so. Gather up brown people and kill them, illegal. That person is a so-and-so, free speech. I mean, it's not complicated, is it? Colin, what a pleasure to have you on the show. We will speak soon. It's been too long. Colin Sutton is a retired murdered senior investigating officer and now Reform UK Policing and Crime Advisor. What a conversation, and what a shocking, devastating case. I mean, that is really the George Floyd story that the establishment media are not talking about. Well, we're going to talk about it a lot. And I think, Finlay, we're going to have to, and Faith, come back to this tomorrow. Can we do that? Because I think this is a massive national conversation that has only just begun. More to come. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
What about this for a story? England's first official cycle street, which gives cyclists and pedestrians priority over motorists, has been built in Cambridge. The £2 million overhaul of Adams Road, one of the busiest cycle routes in the University City, has removed on-road parking and reconfigured junctions to slow traffic. Is this the future? Who better to ask than legendary motoring journalist and former Top Gear presenter Steve Berry. Steve, good to see you again.
I thought you were going to say Jeremy Clarkson then.
If only you had his money, Steve.
Yeah, but unlike him, I can look down and see the equipment.
It's a very, very good point. And I've actually heard about your gear stick.
Well, I am a keen cyclist, and that's probably why, at the age of 62 tomorrow, thank you, I know I don't look it, I'm still in the same waist jeans that I was when I was 18. And I attribute that partially to cycling. I cycled 32 miles yesterday and did a day's work in the middle of it. And do you know why I cycled? Because it was the quickest, most convenient way of getting the job done. And folk who just think they can sit in the car for having a day. Mark, I got back to Manchester last night at 25 past 10 at night. I've been set off on the 5 a.m. train to Southampton. I got back at 25 past 10. Manchester was teeming with cars at 25 past 10 on what? On a Wednesday night. Now, I don't know why Manchester rush hour and our city's a rush hour at that time of the night, but anyone who thought that doing the 3.5 mile journey I had at the end of my day in a car wants the lumps feeling. I got on my bike and I was home in 15, 20 minutes.
Well, I tell you, that speaks volumes. Do you think we're going to see more of these special roads which essentially get rid of cars altogether?
No. And there's a reason for that. They're expensive and they make people vote for the other parties at the elections because folk don't half get wound up. We're not really a cycling nation, especially not in my part of the world. The only people who are cycling where I live are me, some former Somalian child soldiers who are working for the delivery companies, and folk in lycra shorts who want to enter the Olympics. Somewhere like Cambridge, and I have lived in London, I've lived in the southeast, it's a different mindset. There are tons and tons of cyclists there, and it'll work there. But guess what? Where that won't be a vote winner? Bury, Hartlepool,
yeah.
You know, the north of the Midlands. It's all right in lovely Cambridge, but it'll only be a vote winner there. We don't cycle enough in this country.
And Steve, do you think we will ever see the death of the motor vehicle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's here now. It's funny because, with respect to yourself, Mark, people like you ask me questions. It's going to sound horrible, this, but about 5 to 7 years too late. I've been doing a bit of stuff recently where folk in your position said to me, Steve, is there a chance that China is taking over the car industry? I went, I've been telling you for years, it's already happened. We are already in the death throes of the private motor vehicle in the Western world. Jay Leno, the world's greatest car enthusiast, talks about when the internal combustion engine went into mass production and motor cars took over from the horse. That's where we are now. Cars are becoming, people are going to think, this guy's crazy. The change is going to be so super rapid, people aren't going to believe it. It's happening so quickly. Cars are going to become a luxury item that will only be afforded by a few people, like at the start of the motor car. Most of us will get about on trams, buses. My lad was brought up around fantastic cars and motorcycles all his young life. Do you know he gets around town? I'll tell you he gets around town. He hires one of those little electric scooters and he gets to where he's going. The idea to him that he would buy a car, tax the car, put tax petrol in the car, pay road fund duty, pay an outrageous amount for his insurance as a young man. The idea that he would do that is the same as saying to a guy in a Ford Model T, you know what you want to do, mate? You want to get rid of that motor car and get a lovely mule like I've got. That's how ridiculous cars seem to my young son.
Steve, we always love having you on the show. So much common sense, big entertainment as well. What a legend. Steve Berry, motoring journalist and former Top Gear presenter. He's absolutely right. I am 5 or 10 years behind. I don't know what's happening on the roads. All I will tell you is the traffic is getting worse and you are taking your life into your own hands if you get on a bicycle in one of our big cities. That said, I can agree with Steve about his son using an electric scooter. I quite like those little rental electric bikes. They're quite handy and certainly cheaper than insuring a motorbike. We love Steve. Julia is in Brighton in East Sussex. Julia, we've got some breaking news. I'll get your reaction. Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has said we will not allow a lost generation as he vows to tackle youth unemployment after Alan Milburn's sobering report. Is that music to your ears? Do you think that Starmer's going to get this sorted?
I think it's very difficult. I really think that we are not going to get anything happening until we get growth. And growth is really, really difficult because real growth, comes from taking things out of the ground and turning them into things. It doesn't come from moving money around. It doesn't come from, projects. It comes from real growth. And unfortunately, we've had such a sort of period of deindustrialization in this country that it's hard to see how that growth is going to happen, particularly with the policies that we're pursuing. I mean, my point, the reason that I rang was that I was, sorry, it's going back a little bit because it was about sort of youngsters and the job market and so on. And I know that a lot of your callers have sort of said, I left school and I went and worked on a building site, or I could go and work in a shipyard. But none of that exists anymore. All of those jobs have gone.
You're right.
And we kind of replaced it with service industry, but those jobs are going now.
Oh, that's the thing. The youngsters can't get a job in their local pub, Julia.
Well, they can't get anything. I mean, I compare it to me, sort of leaving school in the 70s, working class girl from Birmingham. I had a choice of jobs. Did I want to work in an office? Did I want to work in a bank? Did I want to work in a shop? All of those options were available to me at that time. None of those options are really available now. But of course, we've had an increase in productivity in those areas. But what that means is we've shed jobs. So the jobs don't exist. And the ones that do, you've got about 100 kids chasing them, whether they've been to university or not. So, what was kind of happening for my generation, it was a lot easier. It was far easier to kind of, have social mobility to work your way up. I left school with a few GCSEs. Did a few of these little jobs in shops and whatever, went on to do nursing. That gave me a career. That meant that I didn't have to go to university. I got paid. I got accommodation. And from that, I went on to university and then went on to being a journalist. So all of that was opened up by the jobs market and by the way that, growth that existed at the time helped to propel people, working class people like myself, into the jobs industry. And we're kidding ourselves if we think that still exists, because it doesn't.
I agree with you. And school teachers in the 1970s could buy a house.
Well, they could.
They can't do that now.
No, they
School
can't.
teacher can't buy a house. Forget about it. Unless you're in the sticks.
I bought a flat as a trainee nurse. But that situation does not exist anymore.
Good luck.
It doesn't exist.
And the problem is this, why I say time and time again, Julia, all the money printing during the credit crunch inflated property values.
Absolutely.
Well, it inflated the value of my property. I've got nothing to show for it. I'm not happy about that. House price inflation is as bad as all inflation.
The reason you can't afford a house is because my generation bought the houses and took the profit out of them. Right, and there will be no profit in the future because there won't be growth. So anybody that's thinking they're going to make money out of property, I would sort of, But it's this. I mean, I found Peter Barnes really interesting earlier on when he was talking about grammar schools. Now, I went to a grammar school. That meant social mobility for working class kids.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. If we were to, do a policy of grammar schools, that would be brilliant. But what we have now is just grammar schools in middle-class, conservative voting areas where all the places go to middle-class kids who have tutors and get into these highly competitive, schools, grammar schools. Wherefore, in the past, grammar schools were there for working kids to get social mobility. Doesn't exist anymore.
And isn't it funny how the left, they should be about social mobility and they hate grammar schools. I don't understand it, Julia.
I don't either. They abandoned Sure Start, which was a brilliant sort of, set up for kids where they intervened in nursery age and improved their life chances. That doesn't exist anymore. There really isn't any hope without real growth.
And you're right.
Without an absolute kind of change in policy. But what they will do is tinker around and not make any brave decisions.
I think it's right.
The other thing I'd like
Go
to
on,
say
Julia. Go
is
for
that
it.
If we want Scandinavian levels of services, if we really want that, I hate to say it, you're going to hate me for it,
Do it.
but we have to pay Scandinavian levels of tax.
Well, you're entitled to your view, Julia. I think people wouldn't mind paying high tax if public services improved.
If we got them, exactly. If if we have
if.
proper programs for social mobility, for getting kids jobs, for actually producing real growth, then I think people might take the short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Yeah, Julia, absolutely. People spend a lot of money on an iPhone. It's like £1,000. They paid the money. It's a lot of money because it's very good. And that's the trick with public services. If they were outstanding, then we would pay our taxes with pleasure. Julia, I'd love you to call me again soon. Really enjoyed that. And you're an ex-journalist as well, or maybe even current journalist. So please, please do contribute to the show again soon. I've got some great news. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is almost here. And thanks to Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier, our friends at talkSPORT are giving you the chance to be there. Adidas is sending you and a friend to Dallas to see England versus Croatia live on June the 17th. With return flights, accommodation, spending money, tickets and your very own Adidas official match ball, Trionda. Be at England's first game at the FIFA World Cup at one of the world's best stadia. Here is how to enter.
Get ready for that winning feeling. For your chance to win, head to talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Texts and online entries cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 1st of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. See full terms and conditions at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. Full T's and C's at win.talk.tv.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Has Britain thrown young people under the bus? Carl is in Liverpool. Hello, Carl.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Afternoon, big man. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think from the age of 18 to 30, if you don't have a job, then you should go and do national service. We should bring back national service, and it comes with stipulations. If you're not working and you're in receivership of benefits, obviously not disability, but who knows, you should do national service, because what's the point in you sitting around, you're getting paid to do nothing, go and serve your country for a couple of years. Then, but also that'll, you could see a lot of people then get a job because they don't want to do national service. They've somehow just found a job.
Well, that's right.
I think
And also, Carl, they will pick up a lot of life and practical skills if they do national service.
Absolutely, yeah. It done me the world of good serving in the military. I loved it.
What did it do for you, Carl? Compare Carl before serving in the military and after. What did it do for you as a guy?
Well, when I was younger, where I grew up, just as I was in my teens, friends were, it was kind of gangs and stuff like that. So it was a way out for me. At 16, and it was.
So
just
your
amazing.
prospects were not the best before you went into the military?
Well, no, they were. I mean, it all depended on me, but I didn't want to be around that area at that time because quite a lot of my friends were getting mixed up in things that I weren't interested in, and I thought, well, rather than stick around and get a job after school, I'll join the military. And I looked at my family have served, dating back to World War One. So, yeah.
And what do you get, Carl? You get structure, discipline, friendship,
integrity, honour, self-discipline. You respect people, you respect the world. I think we look at it differently. Veterans and soldiers, we in our world, there's structure, there's stability, there's rules, there's laws. Out here, it's just like a bloody jungle. Anyone can do whatever they want, and that's because governments of old and new aren't doing anything about it. So I say, if we don't have the military, we don't have the personnel, then from the age of 18 to 30, if you're not working, get them in.
It's a great idea.
It won't do them any harm. It really won't. And it will set them up as they enter adultship when they move from 18 into the 20s and 30s. It's a good job, and we need the personnel. It makes sense to me.
Oh, we do. I mean, how big is our army now? What is it, 60,000 people?
Yeah, but most of them are woke. You can now have a beard in the military. I find that astonishing.
Ridiculous.
You can grow a beard. It's laziness. If you go out into the field and you're in conflict zones, I just don't get it. It's laziness. All this woke.
I mean, isn't it shocking? Isn't it amazing that even our military went woke? Even our military was infected with this mind virus, Carl.
Well, the Prime Minister has had them waving the pride flag rather than holding a weapon. It's ridiculous. We don't look like we've got any hope if anything happens to us, and I do think that is an idea in itself. From 18 to 30, if you're not working, I'm sorry, but you're doing national service.
What a great shout, Carl. And as you've rightly said, they will suddenly miraculously find a job to get out of it. What a great chat. We'll speak soon, Carl. What a wise man you are. Big David is in Ipswich. Hello, David.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Very well. What do you think about young people and their attitude these days?
Well, I've got a couple of small stories for you. I've been retired a good few years now, but I ran my own businesses. And just two quick stories. We had a lady come for an interview, and I always got my girls to interview them because I thought if I do it, she might feel a bit pressured.
Of course.
And the ladies came out and went, she's actually really good. She's really friendly, blah, blah, blah. I think she'll work well. Okay. So I went in to see her. We had a little chat. And I said, have you got any questions you want to ask me? I said, oh, yes. My mum said, I've got to ask you, how many sick days can I have?
Oh, my God.
And I said, none, because you won't be working here. Don't ever ask anybody that again. Off you go. And then we always took people on work experience until this girl appeared. And we always paid them, And I said to her, look, what I want you to do, I want you to open the post to work with this lady here, because once you see the names of the clients and what we do, we can discuss with you what's going on, and that will help you understand the business.
Right.
Well, she took great umbrage to this. She was off. She was far above opening post. She said, well, that's the job. And I had lots of problems with her, and I called the lady who placed her with us, and I said, you've got to come, because I can't have her any longer. she thinks she runs the business, and I don't. And the lady came over, and we sat in the boardroom. And you know when someone pushes their chair back and crosses their leg as if to say, I'm in control here? I said to the lady, I said, have a look at that. And she went, I've got the picture straight away. You're going. You're not staying here. Her dad phoned me up, and he remonstrated with me because I'd effectively sacked her, from it. And I said, you're not. I said, what you need to do, mate, is get her to look in the mirror, because the problem is that person looking in the mirror, not me. Her attitude stinks. She was never going to, do anything we wanted her to do. She was only going to do it her way. So she goes. End of story. And put the phone down. And that day onwards, we never took another another person on work experience. We couldn't be bothered to, because the attitude just stunk.
David, I think it's a very familiar story, and you've used the word entitled there about this young generation, and I think you're right about that. I can only say when I started working, in my first millions of different jobs I did in Burger King, and I worked in big lockup making cardboard boxes, and God knows I've done every job. But when I started in radio, I made 57 million cups of tea before I got my first paycheck. And that's the way it should be. David, thank you for your call. Thanks for all the messages as well. Live at 4 o'clock. The amazing Kevin O'Sullivan. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Mark. It's an extraordinary story unfolding from Hampshire. The way the police treated this poor victim, this Sikh guy, stabs this poor kid to death. He's lying there bleeding. The cops turn up, handcuff him because they're convinced that he has subjected the Sikh guy to racist abuse. So typical wokery by the cops. Oh, he's a racist. Don't worry about him. Poor guy bled to death while they're handcuffing him and not really listening to him. Hampshire police have apologised.
Oh, that'll do the trick.
And in court, the Sikh's contention that he was subjected to racist abuse was dismissed by the judge as a wicked lie, which is exactly what it was.
And that ought to be an aggravating factor in his sentence.